Hey people, Shinobi no Kami here. In this fanfic, most people believed the Yondaime to be Naruto's father, but they were wrong. His actual father had to watch as Kyuubi was sealed into his newborn son and sent into a world of hatred. And now, he wants vengeance. Check the description and give a sub to my thumbnail maker God Kage Theories. Hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and if you want to make suggestions or something else, tell me in the comment section. Now let's roll the intro. Chapter 81. This battle will decide the fate of the war. The blonde Hokage said as it was night and just mere hours after the announcement. Seated at the table along with a number of leaf nins including Kakashi, Guy, and others, she overlooked the map. We've received reports that the Tsuchikage, Kage Sosano, has unleashed his entire army, it seems like. Nearly 60,000 by the reports of it. Earth nins, Jashinists, hired mercenaries. All who serve him. Kakashi said to her, and the addition of Snow's army as well brings that up to nearly 75,000. Over double of our own forces. He said with a shake of his head. The enemy is moving towards Sekigahara by the look of it. Tsunade said as well. And to Sekigahara is where we must go as well. She said and folded her arms across her chest. Lady Tsunade, Gaara said to her, the Kage stepping through the tent having heard them talking. That terrain will put us at an extreme disadvantage, it's flat and wide open. There's no cliffs or forests or any place where we can set up ambushes except for a few pieces of long grass. Going there would be suicide. That's why he's going there, he knows that there he can win. Then why do we have to face him there? Surely there's another place we can fight. Where we have the advantage. Guy asked her, not understanding. Look at the size of this army he's made. She said to them. An army that large can destroy almost anything in its path. Look at the surrounding towns and villages, they wouldn't stand a chance. They'd be wiped out instantly. He knows that if we don't fight him at Sekigahara, he'll have his army wipe out surrounding lands. Grieved looks appeared on many of their faces as they realized that had no choice but to go face them. A black-haired pale man with a glasses-wearing ninja and his son beside him entered the tent. Sekigahara, Orochimaru said, looking at the spot. How fitting of a place. He mused and looked at his son, who nodded. Naruto studied the map, knowing full well the history of the place. It was where long ago two armies like before had fought to determine who would rule the land. Now hundreds of years later it was now the place where they would fight. And Anbu appeared suddenly and kneeled. Two people wish to have an audience with you three. He said, and Tsunade looked a bit surprised and mentioned for the person to enter. Well, it appears you are quite outnumbered. A voice said to many of them's surprise, and they turned and saw entering a man in purple robes and entering beside him a young man who had an eye patch over one of his eyes. You. Tsunade said, and many at once stood up in alarm, drawing a hidden weapon. Naruto pulled out Kusanagi in alarm as several Anbu also appeared. Standing in front of them was the strategist Sima Zun and the ruler of Snow Mitsunari Chono, who they had just earlier fought against. The battle had ended when the report had came into both sides. What were they doing here now? Reports said they had left with their army immediately after the battle was over to join up with the Tsuchikage. What are you doing here? Have you come to get yourself killed? Tsunade asked him as the two were surrounded by Anbu. We have come proposing an alliance with you. Sima Zun said, surprising many of them. What? Naruto asked in disbelief, narrowly dropping his sword due to the surprise. As you know, the Tsuchikage is marching towards Sekigahara with his vast army. He outnumbers you nearly 2 to 1, and if you fought him, odds are all of you would die. He said with a smirk. What do you want? Speak now or your tongue will be removed. Gaara ordered, and slowly sand formed around them. We can change the outcome of the battle for you. I am the strategist for Earth and have devised many of the strategies that have been used in this war. The Tsuchikage is little more than a fool who would possibly destroy the world if he gained control of it along with those Jashin ilk. Personally, I have never been fond of them. During the battle, we'll pretend to aid them and then turn around and run them through. Can you believe the loss of morale they would have if 15,000 or more men turned on them? The battle would be yours for the taking, Lady Hokage. With my brilliance and Mitsunari's men we can end the Jishinists. Tsunade glared at him and looked over at Orochimaru and Jiraiya, who clearly didn't trust him. They looked back at her and nodded, sharing the same thoughts. If you join us, I doubt you'd do it for free. What do you want? She asked. Ho, ho, ho. I see you all have your suspicions, very well then. Sima said with a laugh. He moved forward and unfurled the map, making it bigger, and pointed at Iwa, and lifting his head looked at them. After the battle is over with and the Tsuchikage and the Jishinists are dead, Earth will be leaderless. Naturally I expect you'll be having the land of Earth for yourself to divide amongst, as it is one of the bigger land and one of the 5 great villages. In return for assisting you I would like a suitable reward. Say, 5 provinces for me and Earth to control. He asked with a grin. He then looked at Mitsunari, who still didn't say anything. Of course Mitsunari, as the rightful ruler of Snow, would like to be awarded as well. 2 provinces for him as well in Snow. In return we shall betray them and aid you. That sounds reasonable, don't you think? Tsunade glared at him, and the smug smile he had on his face. You have much nerve to come here shortly after attacking and killing our people and threatening our lives. We're not here for the disputes of lands or profit from the sacrifices of others. We accept your offer to join us, but we will not give you anything. That'll be up to all of us after the war has ended. You can make your claim then, she said to him. Sima Zun still smiled and backtracked, joining the ruler of Snow. You possess your grandfather's no-nonsense and bluntness, I see. Very well then. We'll be taking our leave then. Good day, Kages, he said, and he and Mitsunari left and exited the tent. The group watched them go, not believing he could be trusted. Fear not, Orochimaru said to them all. If they betray us, I will crush them like the wretched maggots they are. Naruto looked at his father and then as they examined the map as they prepared to march to Sekigahara. Are you certain about this? We had an alliance with Earth, the Chono clan prizes sticking true to its word. Mitsunari said once, and he and Sima were out of range as the two walked. Sometimes you have to defect to the other side in order to get the most profit. Sima Zun said to him. While the Jishinists and the coalition plot and scheme and pretend to play war, we shall reap the most benefits from it all. He said as they were soon surrounded by several bodyguards who accompanied them as they walked. Raiga and his men have already left, heading towards Sekigahara. We must join there as well. Kage demanded our immediate presence. You have much to learn, Sima said to him. Once we get there we shall have an audience with the Tsuchikage, make sure he still thinks we will serve him. Depending on how the battle goes we may or may not defect to the Leaf Sound Sand Coalition. There's no point in joining a losing force, as there. Mitsunari was quiet for a long moment. If we defect and they do in fact win, will we be rewarded? I long to increase Snow's territory and land. The provinces of Earth would be a first step to gaining complete control. We should be just rewarded. They can't possibly refuse us after we've helped them win. Once everything is over with we may find ourselves in control of the entire land, all of it depending how the battle goes. He said with a grin as they walked. Back at the main camp the Allied forces were preparing to get everything ready for the march to Sekigahara. In one of the tents 20 Sound and Leaf Nins checked their gear as they were already packed. Amongst them was Sakin and Ukin, and Sai from Root. At the lead of the group was Kimimaro Kagaya. Is everything ready? He asked, and the group nodded. They knew their task and their duty they would have to do as they had been selected. They had been chosen by Orochimaru himself, to do a task that would boost morale for their army and possibly end the war. Though odds were they could possibly die. They didn't say anything but looked at one another and nodded, fully prepared for what they must do. Is everyone ready? A voice asked, and they turned and saw to their surprise Naruto and Tayuya entering the tent. If we are, let's move out, he said as they was fully packed as well. Naruto, what are you doing here? Kimimaro asked him, and he smiled. We're going with you on your mission, Naruto stated as if it was obvious. I cannot allow that, we may possibly die on this mission. Orochimaru-sama would never forgive me if I let you go and get yourself killed, Kimimaro said to him, refusing to let him endanger his life. Naruto shook his head. I'm going with you all. I've already talked with Otusan and he has granted me permission. I can tell he was reluctant to do so. Of course Orochimaru-sama was. You are the heir to Otogakure. If you die, our land will be leaderless. You must go with him and the others. This is basically a suicide mission. Sakin pointed in dryly, his arms folded across his chest. Never thought the kid would eagerly go on one. There is still much for you all to learn about me. I have stared into death's eyes before, as well as you Kimimaro, but I won't leave you, any of you. He said and looked at all of them who had been gathered in it to Yuya. It may be unprecedented, the son of a Kage going on such a mission, but I figure that I am something of a unique individual. Let us go at once and show the Jushinists the strength of those who oppose them. Yeah, he coaxed me into going with you as well. To Yuya said, to make sure none of you do anything stupid. She said, folding her arms across her chest, and Naruto grinned at her, knowing despite her words that she had demanded he bring her with him on this. My lord, Kimimaro said and kneeled and bowed his head before him, surprising him. He noticed that a tear dripped out of the Kage's eye. Kimimaro being truly grateful that he served such a master. A master he would serve with his life. Looking on, Sai watched, his face blank but on the inside amazed that Naruto would inspire. The group of +20 soon left, heading on their mission. As they moved, disappearing from the main camp, oblivious that they had left, they were unaware that a pink-haired medic was watching their movements from afar. At 11 p.m. as a light rain descended upon the field that night, the allied forces began their march, silently setting out from the Kage area towards Sekigahara, torches doused so not to give the enemy any symbol or early detecting of their movements. Later that night, far away, a horseman rode past several lit torches as he rode directly into the main camp area. Whipping his horse to ride faster, he soon came upon the main tent of the commander of the army. Dismounting, he entered and gave the report. So they have taken the bait. Very well then, at Sekigahara we shall then crush them as I intended to do. Kage Sosano said. Seated at a large table with several of his men including Hidan, Lu Xiaoan, Mutadedoji and others. As always, he was surrounded by his 5 elite bodyguards. Kage-sama, allow me the privilege of the first attack. Kanbei said. I will crush them in one swoop and spread their ashes across the wind. A seated man banged his fist against the table in anger. Fool. That privilege is mine and mine alone. Lu Xiaoan said, standing up from his seat at the table. I will be the one to defeat them. My men and I shall lead the first charge. He said angrily. No, this is my task. Mutadedoji said and withdrew his nodashi. I, unlike most of you, have a personal matter in this battle. It is time I finally ended the Kyuubi child's life. He brought his blade before his face and stared at the flawless enchanted blade. I despise Naruto Uzumaki, he said coolly. If given the chance, I would tear out his beating heart and feed it to the dogs. His eyes had a look of madness in them as he said that, as he remembered how the boy had spilled his blood at the Chunin exams. He is mine to kill, he is destined to fall by my blade. And that is why I shall lead the army. If you think. Silence. Kage ordered. This battle will decide the fate of the war. We will win this battle and usher in an era of rule by Jashin. I will not deal with your petty squabbles or arguments. He said, and an aura surrounded him as he said that. Kage, why are we wasting our time with those scum? We should be looking for the final claw. Hidan said to him as he had immediately called to a halt to it after his attempt to break Naruto had failed. We can find the claw after we have killed every last one of them. Kage responded. Once we have it, we can put an end to any other resistance once and for all. For now we go to Sekigahara and destroy the coalition once and for all. After his attempt to break Naruto's spirit had failed, he in fury had called out to all of his men and followers to him at once. While Snow was busy stalling them, oblivious to what he was doing, he was gathering his entire army behind the gates of Iwagakure and preparing to unleash them all at once, intending to win and seize power in a single battle by wiping them all out. Sekigahara was the place he had chosen for it to be at. Kage-sama, Gongzan Tachibana said to him. Shall we begin moving towards Sekigahara as well? Mitsunari and his men will join up with us there as well, bringing our total to over 70,000. Who shall lead the first strike? Hidan asked and grinned. I shall do it myself if no one else has the balls to do it. He said and was glared at by many of them. Lu Xiaoan. Kage said, and the warrior stood up. You shall lead the first attack. Be grateful I'm giving you this after you left Zhongmao to die at Mikitagahara, don't disappoint me. He said, and the rings on his hands glowed ominously. Lu Xiaoan nodded and stood up, clutching his mighty halberd. The Tsuchikage stood up as well. Move out at once. We head to Sekigahara and battle immediately. He commanded. Hours later. So how much further until we get to Sekigi, Sekigu, Sekifudiver? Zaku Abumi said as it was now morning and the combined alliance of Leaf, Sound, and Sand had been marching for hours. Shut up. Keep it up and we'll have their entire army knowing we're here. Enko called back to him as she could sense that they were not far from here. A mist had covered the early morning grounds as they were nearing and getting closer. Once there, Haku was marching alongside Dosu Kinyuta and a group of other Sound Nins when he felt a presence walking behind him and picking up speed towards. He slowed his pace and soon he was marching beside Neji Hyuga. You risk much what you have done. Neji said, speaking up suddenly. You knowingly put my cousin in danger, letting her recklessly trying to get herself killed. He said to him and Haku looked at him. I know full well that you are the one who inspired her to join us. Hiyashi-sama would kill you once he finds out she went off and fought in the army instead of staying home. He said as he was referring to Hinata having discovered who she was. Hinata made her choice long before I found out who she was. Haku replied to him. A fool's words. I discovered her yesterday and forced her to go back. She's now in Konoha where she should have been. There is no place in this for her. Neji said as he glared at him. Hinata wanted to fight, she didn't want to be a burden. She longs to gain you and your uncles. Enough. Neji said bitterly. You have put a foolish infatuation in her. This crush she has on you could bring ruin to the Hyuga clan if she had been killed thanks to you. Neji said to him. Once this is over with I shall speak to Hiyashi-sama and the Hyuga council to make sure she never tries such a foolish thing again. He said and walked off. Haku watched him go shaking his head. He still had much to learn. In the front of the group was the 3 Sannin leading the march. Orders had been put to keep a guard up as in this mist and fog they were prime targets for being ambushed by them. Look up ahead, Shikamaru said suddenly and pointed out to them. They are here, Kakashi said as he casted a jutsu that enhanced his eyesight and about 400 yards away he could see banners that displayed the symbols of Jashin and Earth. It must be one of their rear flanks. Ibiki Morino said looking out as well. A scouting party by the look of it I'd guess. A gray toad darted past him and made its way up to the Sannin. He stopped beside Jiraiya and croaked and he nodded understanding. That's their rear guard. This little guy is saying that the main force of their army is less than 4 miles away from here. They are also marching as well. Jiraiya said to them as he had summoned a group of toads and sent them ahead earlier to spy on them. Another one, this one a different color appeared and croaked as well and Jiraiya looked a bit alarmed. What is it? Tsunade asked him seeing his concern. I don't know but it seems like a group of 20 of ours is near the main force. Jiraiya said. What? Tsunade said out loud. I sent them last night before we left. Orochimaru said to them. They are to conduct a raid and possibly assassinate the Tsuchikage in their main camp. An S-class mission. And you decided not to tell us. Suan shouted at him angry that he withholds such info. Don't think you're the only one concerned for them. He responded to her in a surprising tone of voice. He turned his head away from them as if he was upset he had made such an order. Naruto's with them ain't he? Jiraiya asked seeing him turning his head away. Orochimaru didn't respond. Meanwhile, the 20-plus ninjas staying hidden from a distance looked on at the main marching Jashin force at the eastern side of Sekigahara. They had remained in hidden and had chosen to get ready and make their move. If we succeed, we can end the war today without any battle. Kimimaro said as he, Naruto and Tayuya looked on. The 20 were getting into position ready to make their move. This fog hinders us from seeing a damn thing. It works for us as well. Tayuya said as the group revealed smoke bombs. Be quick all of you. We only got one shot, if we fail to kill him we must pull back at once. Naruto said as they saw Kage Sosano riding on horseback in the front of the army personally leading them. A sound was suddenly heard and they turned and looked and saw Raiga Kurosuke and his men appear and join up with them. The swordsman carried Rinmara on his back as his marauders joined up with the Jashinists' army, increasing their numbers. They watched slowly as Kage in the lead passed them by. Now, Kimimaro called out and the group threw their smoke pellets at them using chakra to enhance their reach and throwing strength. Smoke fell up into the air as they exploded surprising many of the Jashinists and confusing them. Attack! Naruto shouted and they charged out of the mist, One leaf nin threw a paper bomb which exploded right in the middle of a group of them, sending them off their feet. Lightning fast, Naruto made several hundred bushins and they threw dozens of kunai, hitting them in the chest and abdomen regions. But the advantage was only for a moment, as the Jushinists quickly recovered under the command of their leader and several archers fired and hit and killed 2 of them. Muda, seeing this from afar, gave the command to his men to rush to the Sakin, leapt in the middle of a group, and he and his brother cut down a few before having to retreat. Tayuya played her flute and summoned her doki, which attacked. Sai drew several birds and brought them to life, and they carried and dropped explosive tags onto them. Kage ordered commands demanding his army reform and fight. He fired a burst of energy from his rings and killed 3 in an explosion. He saw several clones and, recognizing them as Naruto, fired a great fireball which incinerated many of them. The army formed around him, protecting their leader, making sure no harm came to him. Kimimaro, now is your chance. Kill him now, Naruto shouted as he and the others moved to buy him time to put his plan into action. While in the midst of this, Kimimaro had knocked out a horseman and took his horse. Getting on the beast, he kicked it in the side, ordering it to move. Drawing a bone sword, he cut down other horsemen and made his way upwards towards Kage. He plowed his way through, leading the beast through the center, not stopping as he got closer and closer to his target. Making his way through despite the fact he was surrounded on all sides. He could end it here if he killed him. Kage, prepare to die, he shouted and leapt off the horse and over the dozens of weapons aimed and thrown at him, over the 5 bodyguards and right at the Jashin leader. He slashed at him and Kage blocked with his mace, the blade cutting into it. Name yourself, maggot, he ordered as they pitted themselves against one another. My masters are Orochimaru and Naruto Uzumaki. My name is Kimimaro Kage, he shouted and cut through the mace and leapt and took down 3 earth nins. Kage shouted, recognizing the name and bloodline abilities he possessed. He formed a barrier around himself. Kage-sama, a female voice shouted, and Dajao appeared and fired several fireballs at Kimimaro. He deflected them with his blades and avoided a beam of energy from Kage's rings as several men gathered around him, protecting their leader. Naruto avoided a swing and kicked an earth nin in the face as he and Sai fought back to back and turned and saw Muda and his men charging towards them. With them were the Kurosuke family as well. Damn it, pull back, he called, and the remaining group quickly made a hasty retreat, disappearing as fast as they had appeared. Of the 20 that there was, only 14 remained, but they did take down 25 with their ambush. Kimimaro avoided another blast that would have killed him and spat, seeing how he was being cornered. Kage, next time we meet I've have your head, he shouted and turned and slashed his way through, creating an opening, and escaped along with the others. Pursue, Muda ordered his men to give chase as they couldn't have gotten far when a messenger appeared. Kage, a scout appeared and kneeled before him and Dajao. The armies of Mitsunari and Shimazune have arrived less than a mile from here. They'll be joining up with us soon, he said, giving his report. Halt the army and stop pursue, he commanded as he saw several more of his men approaching them. I won't waste time pursuing a rabble of maggots. We continue our march and set up camp on the eastern side. Move out, he ordered his men as Hidan and Lu Xiaoan had appeared. As the army continued, Muda Daidoji stared at the spot where Naruto had been. He clutched his Nodashi, which still glowed faintly for a few seconds, indicating Naruto wasn't far off. Next time there will be no escape, he promised, vowing to kill him in battle. Later, we attempted to kill the Kage, but we failed in our task. He still lives, Naruto said as he, Tayuya, Sai, and the others kneeled before the 3 Kages, having returned from their mission. We lost a third of the men that came with us, although we did manage to kill over 20 of theirs. I'm sorry we failed, he said, taking full responsibility. It's all right, Naruto, Tsunade said to him as Orochimaru and Gaara were on her right and left. The important thing is that all of you are safe. You did a bold move back there, one many of us never knew you was even going to do. Indeed, what matters now is that we set up our camp. They have taken the eastern side, so we shall have to set up on the west side of Sekigahara. Orochimaru said to them, and they nodded. If I had been able to kill him I would have stopped them in the war. Kimimaro said, shaking his head. You did well, all of you, Tsunade said to them. Now go and rest up for the battle ahead. The alliance made their way, knowing that the Kage's army was most likely just miles away. They set up and made themselves ready on the western side. Orochimaru later stood overlooking a hilltop and looked over their army. This is something, isn't it? Naruto asked, standing beside his father. To think we have gathered this many. The Jushinists outnumber us and have almost double our combined forces, Naruto. Orochimaru said to him, and he looked out into the distance, and faintly from the hill he could see their main camp. Tomorrow the battle shall begin. They have taken the east and we shall take the west. He then let out a dry chuckle. It appears as if the fates are toying with us, he said, and Naruto looked at him. Ishida and Tokugawa fought here, remember? Tokugawa in the east and Ishida in the west. The Eastern Army won Sekigahara on that day and gave way to the Tokugawa dynasty. We have the high ground, so that gives us a slight advantage, Orochimaru said to him. Naruto looked out over the army, seeing his brother and his friends and companions. We'll win, Naruto said, and his father looked at him. We'll win this battle and end the war. If we cannot defeat them, then we were never meant to come this far and to see what lies beyond this. I know we will emerge victorious here at Sekigahara. Orochimaru looked at his son and looked back out over the alliance as the battle grew ever closer. At the Jushinists' camp. Damn them, Lu Xiong shouted, banging his fist against the table in fury. Those miserable worms. They dare try to end this before it starts, he said as they were in the main tent. Lu Xiong, calm down, Shingen said to him as the warrior was furious over the ambush that had happened earlier. If they had killed Kage-sama, what makes you think our army wouldn't have fell apart? Kanbei asked him. All that we need to do in the battle is trap them in between our forces and those of Snow in a pincer. There we can destroy them, Gongzan Tachibana said, looking over the map as they were in the meeting camp and were discussing the events. Also at the meeting was Raiga Kurosuke. At the front was Kage, who wasn't saying anything as his men argued how they should go about. He hadn't said a word since it started. Tsuchikage, a ninja, appeared, presenting Mitsunari Chono and Sima Zun. The two entered the tent and stood before them. Ah, Tsuchikage, good to see you're still alive, Sima said to him. It's about time you bastards showed up. We've been waiting for you, Hidan said, darkly folding his arms across his chest. Sima chuckled at them. All of you may find it interesting, but last night we were meeting with the Alliance forces, discussing how to destroy you in the upcoming battle. They seemed quite amused, some of them did, like a child with a shiny new object, he said, smiling at them. What? Many of them shouted at once in shock. Traitor, Lu Xiong shouted, raising up from the table, drawing his weapon along with Raiga and Muta. Mitsunari reached towards his blade and pulled it as well to defend himself just in case. Before they could be attacked, Kage raised his hand, mentioning them to hold. Sima Zun, seemingly unconcerned he was moments away from being impaled and skewered, continued speaking. Let's not be so hasty. Neither of us are fond of any of them in the alliance. I do not wish to serve fools and those who believe it is their right to rule and command. No, I do not like them at all. So instead of betraying you and aiding them, what are your thoughts on us staying here and aiding you in crushing them? Kage stared at them, his expression not changing. In return, all we ask in exchange is Konoha and the Land of Fire, say 5 provinces for me and 2 for Mitsunari here. What do you say? That sounds reasonable, don't you think? A small price for victory, he asked as he was playing both sides. Kage stared at them as the tension in the room mounted. Then unexpectedly he started laughing, surprising his men. How interesting, he responded at last. So, do you agree? Sima asked him, smirking. I agree to nothing, Kage responded, taking the smirk off his face. You jest, you refuse our generous offer, Sima Zun said, surprised. Sima Zun, I need neither you nor Mitsunari to obtain victory here today. Leave at once, Kage ordered. Sima looked at him and then started to laugh as well in amusement. A man of fortitude, I see. Very well, we'll leave now. Perhaps, you may regret your decision, he said as they left. Kage watched them go. Battle shall be won by Jashin, not by pathetic fools. Begin the council. We are walking a dangerous line here, Mitsunari said to Sima as they headed to their side of the army where the main snow forces were at. Keep this up and we'll gain nothing at all. Patience, my one-eyed friend. It takes skill what we are doing. But still, once the battle begins tomorrow, we shall do nothing. We shall only watch. Once one side gains control, then we shall make our move. Whether it's with the Jushinists, or the Alliance, he said as they walked to their main camp. Well, if this plan works, we may just pull off a miracle and win tomorrow. Tsunade said to them as they finished making the layout of the plan for tomorrow. Maybe so, if everything works out and with a little luck, we might just pull it off. Shikamaru said as they looked at the map. So it has come to this then. This shall be the last battle here. Sekigahara shall determine who will win the fourth ninja war. Kakashi said as they prepared for the upcoming battle. Sekigahara, at one time hundreds of years ago the greatest battle of that age between the forces of Ishida and Tokugawa was fought there. Now another battle would be fought that would also determine the outcome of many. On the eastern side the Jashinists and the Land of Earth led by Kage Sosano and Hidan, desiring to see a land ruled by Jashin and crushing all who stood in their path. On the western side the alliance of the Leaf, Sound, and Sand, led by the three Sannin and their loyal ninjas who fight in the name of preserving peace. The desire of conquest of the Jashinists, the will of fire in the alliance. The two armies had clashed and struggled against one another multiple times in the past months with many losses on both sides, with many joining each side involving themselves in the Fourth Ninja War as aggressions and tensions rose between them and have come to one final contest. The battle to determine the fate of the land at Sekigahara is about to begin. Chapter 82. The eve of battle, perhaps the longest moment in a fight. The copy nin said, standing outside looking around the site as it was nighttime. Kakashi looked around and could sense that come morning, many lives would be lost. Even he might meet his end here depending on how it all played out. Whatever happens, this will probably be the last battle of the Fourth Shinobi War. Whoever wins decides the course of it. All of us, even those in Iwa and the Jashinists, are betting everything on the outcome of this. Win and the threat is over, lose and this age of Jashin they proclaim will begin. He mused to himself as he stood on a hill overlooking the area. This was truly unprecedented, over 100,000 was there in total. Excuse me, a voice said, and he turned his head and saw a long black-haired girl from Sound walk towards him and kneel. Naruto wants you and everyone to meet in the center of the camp. Kintsuchi said to him. Oh, yes, he says he has something for everyone. A gift, she said and left. Huh, gifts eh? What, coupons to Ichiraku's? He said to himself and went to head towards there. Many of the Leaf, Sound, and Sand ninjas had gathered in the center talking amongst themselves. What's he up to this time? Enko mused, crossing her arms over her chest, standing next to Asuma and Gurren. He's got some nerve keeping us up at this hour, she said, but smirked knowing the boy she loved as a brother had something planned. We've made some excellent plans, but it all ends tomorrow, Shikamaru said, standing across from Dosu Kinyuta, the two strategists having worked all day and night to prepare themselves and the camp for tomorrow. Kakashi joined up with Kurenai and Guy and looked around, seeing Sasuke and Sakura as well as Haku and the others. There was no sign of Naruto though. This is a waste of time, Ibiki Morino muttered to himself. We're just asking for an ambush right now, he said sourly, but was ignored. The Kage stood next to his siblings and Baki and Chio as the three Sannin stood in the back watching on. What's he up to? Has he got some sort of plan or something? Jiraiya asked, and Orochimaru only shook his head. He wouldn't have called us out here for no reason. He's got something ready, Orochimaru answered. Looking on from a distance, Naruto grinned, seeing them all there along with Tayuya. He then turned to the Anbu he had persuaded into coming with him as they had several items set up. Okay, light them, he said, and one produced a match and lit the fuse. A loud shrilling sound was heard, drawing the attention of them, and a rocket fired up into the air and exploded, turning into several sparkles of red. A second one was fired and exploded, turning into a pink butterfly. Several more fired into the air and exploded, bursting into multiple colors and shapes of animals as they lit up the sky as the group lit off fireworks illuminating the sky. Huh, so that's what he had in mind, Kakashi said, smiling underneath his mask as he looked on. So that's what your kid had planned, Tsunade said to Orochimaru, who smiled at her as they watched. Funny, I can feel my morale and spirits rising now, Asuma said as well as he looked on with the others at the show. Even the stoic Ibiki allowed a smile to form as they watched on, as the fireworks were indeed having an effect on them, lifting the burdens and stress from their bodies and increasing the coalition's morale as they looked on. Naruto and Tayuya watched on silently, looking above at the spectacle as the fireworks exploded, lighting up the dark sky. The two didn't say a word to one another as they looked on with her hand in his. They weren't the only ones watching. At the eastern side of the field it had also attracted the attention of the ninjas of Iwagakure and Snow looking on as well, some wondering just what they were up to with the display. Keiji Sosano, the Tsuchikage and leader of the Jashinists, scoffed in disgust at the spectacle from his tent. "What futile foolishness," he said looking on. The next morning, "At long last the day I have waited for has arrived," a figure staring out into the fog said. "The day I finally slay Naruto Uzumaki," he said, and Muda Daidoji pulled out his Nodashi which glowed, sensing the boy's presence. He sensed a presence behind him and didn't bother to look. "You've changed. At first at the exams I thought you was just a deluded fool of a zealot. But somehow along the way you've turned into a conqueror," he said to Keiji, who was behind him. "The two former agents of Akatsuki. The Kyuubi vessel is not to be killed." Keiji said, little emotion in his voice. "He will be among the few survivors today." "What?" Muda said, turning to face him. "What makes you think that boy is going to live?" he said, anger in his voice. "I've learned not to underestimate Naruto Uzumaki," Keiji responded, remembering how his attempt to break him had failed. "The boy, although it is not shown, has the power to change the world. Mere normal fools are no match for the power he has." "Power? What power?" "The Kyuubi," Muda asked in disbelief. "I've already proven I can defeat him. I was the one who nearly killed him back in Konoha," he said, not understanding. "The boy will be used in the final phase of my plans. I will harness it for Jashin's will and use it to create a world of his desire. If you strike him down I will see to it you are tortured for a millennia," he said, warning him, and left. Muda glared at him, fury on his face. What power? Power to change the world. What foolishness was he talking about? Tell me why did Lady Tsunade give control of the coalition to Orochimaru?" Ibiki said as he paced around the room where the war council would be had. The interrogator, having heard of the Hokage's decision the day before to let the Snake Sanin command them for the battle, was making his objections heard. Orochimaru is a powerful man, even Sarutobi and the Yondaime feared his prowess and ability in battle. Jiraiya said, seated at the table. "With him on our side our chances of victory this day are much higher," he said to him and the others in the room. "Arg, but Toad Sanin, you know he can't be trusted," Ibiki protested, and many of the Leaf Nins there nodded distrust in their eyes. Despite the alliance, many Leaf Nins still harbored resentment and hatred towards the traitor and current ruler of Sound. Orochimaru-sama has as much stake in this as does the Leaf. Gurren said, seated down at the table. "He will see to it that the Jashin fools are crushed." "You don't know him well, do you?" Anko said, a frown on her face. "It hasn't been 6 months since he nearly destroyed Konoha. What makes you think he won't try it again?" Orochimaru making his way to the council closed his eyes, envisioning the meeting. At his side was Kabuto. "Right now, I suppose they are in there cursing my name," he said quietly, and Kabuto nodded silently. "Orochimaru is a fearful man. He did cause Sand and my father to agree to a war," Gaara the Casecage stated. "I have heard the rumors and tales, how he seeks domination of the land as well. It is true he cannot be trusted. And perhaps you worry too much," Gurren responded, and Kimimaro Kagaya there as well reached towards his shoulder, ready to pull out a sword. Shikamaru, seated at the table, let out a bored sigh as he looked on. "Naruto is with him. If there is one person he would never betray, it's his son," Kakashi said, seated as well. "HMPH, maybe so, but perhaps he is manipulating the boy, the same way he did most of us," the distrustful Ibiki said. Kakashi was about to respond when they all sensed a presence. The assembled group turned and saw a person entering. "So you have all assembled," Orochimaru said, Kabuto behind him. He noted the mistrust in some of their eyes and the hatred in Anko's. He moved to the front of the table and took his seat. "Very well then, let us begin," he said as the war council started. "Can't see a damn thing through this freakin' fog." Tayuya muttered outside as her, Naruto, and Haku stared into the battlefield. A deep fog had developed over the night and had engulfed the entire area. "Well, there's not much we can do, come on, it's about to start," Haku said, and he and the redhead left. Naruto started to leave as well. "Naruto," a voice said suddenly, and he turned back, wondering where it came from, and looked up to the sky, and his eyes widened at what he saw. The clouds parted and he saw before him an outline of a shinobi standing there in the heavens. His spirit was looking down upon from above. "I entrust my legacy to you, my dream of a land of peace," the voice said to him. "To me," Naruto said in shock at what he was seeing. He remembered. My dream cannot die. It must not die. The sage said and turned and faded back into the clouds. For real. I'm to continue your dream. Naruto said to himself. Brother, what's wrong? Haku asked him. You're staring off into space, now's the hell not the time for that. Yuya said to him. Haku walked up to him. Now's our opportunity, to fulfill our oath that we made. Naruto looked at them and back at the fog. His eyes narrowed in determination. Kage Sosano, he said, anger in his voice at the one who had started the fourth war. You and the Jashinists have go on too long. You've endangered the land and the people and the ones I love and care about. It ends this day, he said and pulled out Kusanagi. I swear, that I will stop you and create a new world. He said and cut at the fog going right through it. No match for the burning desire he had. The fog lifted and went away dispelling as the field was revealed showing the battleground. Is it ready? The Tsuchikage and leader of the Jashinists asked the white-haired sadist. It is, at the end of this day the world of the shinobi shall end. And a new world will raise up from its ashes, a world ruled by Jashin. Hidan exclaimed to him. Hidan, deal with Orochimaru personally, I want him broken. Kage said to him and Hidan grinned. I just know how to break the snake. He said and turned and left. Kage raised his hands and brought them before him as the jewels he wore on the rings glowed. The power of Jashin coursing through his veins. He would unleash Jashin's most powerful and destructive jutsus this day. Jutsus that he himself had created and would annihilate all in his path. You may have the power to change this world, Naruto, but so do I. He shouted, visioning the world Jashin sought of dominance and destruction, the world bowing before his master for an eternity. You, who do not even know the fox's true name. Who does not even know Madara Uchiha's lifelong ambition that involved the 9 Biju. Jashin also sought the Biju as well to master his ultimate jutsu that will control the world. I only need one to do so. To create a world that is mine and mine only. He shouted as his voice deepened and for a moment his features turned into that of an warlord who sought nothing but total destruction and then changed back. The time of the shinobi has passed. The age of Jashin begins this day. Attack. At that Dajao gave the signal to do so and at once the Jashin army prepared to charge. The Snow army prepared to move out as well. Hold your positions. Sima Zan shouted to them. None of you take a single step forward. The strategist ordered the men. Mitsunari Chono looked on as his force stayed in position, not moving or going to get involved in the battle just yet. Waiting to see how the battle would unfold before they did anything. They aren't doing anything, but are they going to just stand there or are they going to defect? Kakashi noted looking on. Well, it's about time it started. He said as he felt the ground start to rumble, it was about to begin. Kakashi, Might Guy said to him. If this is truly our last fight. He said and Kakashi saw that instead of his usual face he was all serious. It's been a pleasure having you as my rival and friend. He said with all sincerity. Yeah, you too. Kakashi said as well and the two grasped their hands together and shook them in a form of mutual respect and friendship. Naruto was getting ready when he heard a voice call out to him. He turned his head and saw Tsunade walking towards him. With her was Sakura and Shizune. Naruto, drink this. She said and tossed him a vial which had a gold-colored liquid in it. What's this stuff? Naruto asked her looking at the contents. Drink it, it'll help you in the fight. Might even save your life if you're lucky. The Hokage said to him. Naruto looked at it not sure, shrugging he unscrewed the lid and downed it. He nearly threw up as it had an awful taste. If it doesn't kill me first. He exclaimed to her after catching his breath. You'll thank me after this is over. Tsunade said with a smirk. Be careful out there, live for you and your father's sake. She said and turned and left. Naruto watched her go unaware that the stuff he had drank was actually a protective antidote she had made from the poison she had extracted from him when he first met here. He quickly made his way over to Haku and to Yuya. He was given command of a small group of shinobi, being put in charge again since Mikitagahara. Everything ready? He asked Anko who nodded at him. Don't move until they move. Otusan told me that whoever moves first, loses first. Does that include arrows moving? Azumo asked him as he handed him a telescope. Naruto took it and peered into it and saw what the first attack would be. They had set up hundreds of ballistas and arbalists ready to fire. Steady. Jiraiya called out to everyone as they had their own setup. Don't fire just yet, let them waste their ammunition first. As soon as he spoke, the Jashinists fired, letting loose their artillery as hundreds of arrows and bolts filled the sky all at once. They reached great heights and then descended down upon them as they watched on. The arrows were stopped as they hit the barrier that Tsunade had set up, the attacks unable to penetrate past it that she had set up around the main camp. They bounced and broke apart on contact, breaking into pieces as they fell onto the ground. One large bolt either by force or luck penetrated through and fell downwards towards Gaara. The Kage looked up as it came down onto him. Without even blinking, his sand formed around it and snapped it in two. After several tense seconds, the arrows stopped, not one injury having occurred from it. Now, Tsunade shouted as the advantage was theirs. Fire! Orochimaru shouted, giving the order, and they let loose with their own. The coalition fired their own, filling the air and raining down upon them. Unlike the coalition, they didn't have a barrier set up, and so they scattered and tried to avoid them. Some were unfortunate and were struck down and impaled by them. Kage looked on, an unconcerned look on his face as they frantically tried to dodge and block them, and some were killed. Enough of this, he said, and his rings started to glow. He brought his hands forward and began doing hand symbols. Jashin style, incinerating fireball. He shouted, and above him a giant fireball appeared above him and he fired it. Holy! Naruto shouted, seeing it come at them at a fast speed. The fireball slammed into Tsunade's barrier at full force but did not penetrate it. Kage again did more hand symbols and his rings glowed again. Jashin style, bolts of eternal damnation. From his rings 8 bolts of lightning shot out of them and struck the barrier, lighting up the field. Despite its power, they were unable to break through it. Impressive slug Sanin, you live up to your name after all. Kage said, looking on. But you can't hold it forever. Jashin style, tornado fangs. His third jutsu activated and 2 large cyclones appeared in the middle of the field and uplifted everything in its path as its debris slammed into the barrier, which still held despite the ferocity of his attacks. Are we just supposed to stay here and get pummeled all day? Kankuro shouted, looking on, holding on due to the fierce blowing winds. Keep to the plan. Baki shouted at him. Nobody moves until they give the order. We can't win straight up against a large force like that. We must tire them out first. At the snow base, Mitsunari Chono looked on. Lord Mitsunari, why aren't we doing anything? We must attack at once. We can take the field with our Oshu archers. A snow ninja said to him. No, he responded, looking on. It wasn't time to make his decision yet. A fast decision could prove disastrous to him and his men. He must wait and see what happens. He had to make the right choice. For the benefit of him and his people. Catapults. Hidan ordered, and the earth nins and Jashinists moved to the constructed weapons and placed rocks on them, and pouring oil on them lit them with a torch and set them aflame. Fire. He commanded, and they pulled the levers, letting them loose into the air. Some weren't able to make the distance and hit the ground, lighting it up with flames. The others hit the barrier but did not break through. In return, the coalition answered back with their own ballista and arbalists, given orders to aim for them to destroy them. The Jashinists moved out of the way, trying to avoid the death from above. Lu Xiaoan looked on and saw that one was coming downwards towards him. Everyone else moved away from him as he stood still as it came down on him, not moving a muscle. As it appeared it was going to hit him, he let out a cry and thrust his arm up and caught it at the last second with one hand, it just inches away from the tip, impaling his neck. With a growl he snapped it in half and tossed the bolt to the ground in disgust. Lady Hokage. Ibiki shouted and rushed towards her. A force of about 500 led by Raiga Kurosuke has swept around and is nearing our flank. They must have moved out while we was occupied with them. I see, Tsunade said to herself. Is the ambush in place? She asked, surprising him. Shikamaru and Dosu figured. Something like this would happen. We're ready for them. As she spoke, the earth force led by Raiga was making its way around the battlefield, aiming to attack from the side. Stupid fools, too busy occupied with what's in front of them. He said with a grin. Our Raiga-sama. Rinmara shouted, his voice full of fear, surprising him. Suddenly a loud sound was heard and they turned their heads and saw rolling down upon them giant boulders, and one landed in front of them and behind them, blocking the path. The Kurosuke family panicked and scattered, trying to flee. Fire. There's fire everywhere. A ninja shouted as orange flames surrounded them all and trapped them and only made the boulders more horrifying. Damn it. Raiga cursed in disbelief. This ain't no fire, it's a genjutsu. Break through it. He yelled and drew out his twin swords. Electricity came from them and he charged it up. Lightning ball. He shouted and charging it up fired the attack and hit the boulder behind them and shattered it to pieces. Many of them turned and fled. Get back here. He ordered them but they didn't listen. Suddenly a mist formed around the area. What the? Kurigakure. He muttered recognizing it. Screams were heard from his men and he and Rinmara could only listen on to their screams of horror as those that remained were being cut down. He felt a presence and he narrowly ducked in time avoiding having his head cut off. He turned and saw the blade of Zabuza now in the hands of Haku who attempted to kill him with the silent death ability. You. He shouted but seeing he was outgunned here quickly turned and fled as well. That settles that, Gosu Kinuta said as the mist disappeared and the flames did as well. Good job tossing those boulders. If we survive this first meal's on me, he said to Choji who had tossed and rolled down the boulders. This path is secure for now, they won't try it again for a while. Kurenai said having done the genjutsu. With her were several Anbu who had cut them down. Agreed we best head back to Naruto and the others. This was just a skirmish. The battle hasn't even started yet. Haku said to them all as they had dealt with the attempted ambush. Back at the field Kage Sosano gave out orders for the first wave to attack. Drawing their weapons the group charged the earth shaking at their feet. All that got in their path was cut down. Standing before them was a group of samurai amongst them Sakin and Ukin. The two groups smashed into each other as a wild battle took place, as the two forces attacked each other as the ground became red with blood with both sides. The two brothers activated their cursed seal giving them additional strength as they fought. Orochimaru looking on didn't give any orders just yet knowing that the group had to hold for now. Sakin snapped the enemy's neck and rejoined with his brother when the sound of many stomping feet was heard. What the? He said and turned and he and Ukin's eyes widened as they saw several rhinos charging them, gigantic beasts charging in the path uncaring if they hit their own comrades as they were being ridden by Kanbei and other earth ninjas. A group of samurai attempted to form a wall and stop them but they shattered upon contact some being gored by their horns. The rhinos roared as they got whipped into a frenzy as they crushed all that got in their path. Kanbei grinned and slammed his mace into an retreating enemy's head smashing it. He directed his rhino and charged it into a group of 5 samurai sending them flying. The rhinos were destroying all that got in their way. Retreat. Voices cried out and the group turned and fled. Kanbei gave the order to pursue. On another rhino a vicious-looking man with wild hair activated his own cursed seal and leapt down and dashed after them. Shingen seems excited. I shall have to not be outdone, he said and grinned evilly and his own cursed seal activated granting him more power. He smacked his rhino in the side and the beast roared and charged. He saw a young female samurai trying to escape and he directed it towards her. He could imagine the look on her face when she was impaled through the heart from behind. He was just feet away from killing her. He was surprised when a green blur appeared in front of him and grabbed the rhino by the horn and stopped it. What the? He said in surprise as the bushy-browed man struggled to hold the beast. Might Guy gritted his teeth as the beast tried to push him back but he held his ground. I've had enough of you. Might Guy said to him. Feel the true power of my burning youthful spirit. He exclaimed as he opened his gates. To Kanbei's surprise he lifted the wild rhino up and held it overhead. What are you doing? Kanbei shouted as the rhino was being overpowered. Guy began spinning the beast by the horn picking up speed with each spin. Guy grunted and gritted his teeth as he began spinning faster and faster becoming a green tornado. All eyes were on him at his unbelievable strength as he spun and spun. Guy then let out a loud cry and threw the rhino with Kanbei still on it at the other rhino riders dislodging the riders and knocking the beasts down stopping their advance. Shingen was going far beyond the others, the man going crazy due to the seal he had been given by Kage, fighting like an animal as he savagely made his way. You're mine. He howled and charged Gurren seeing her. The kunoichi dodged his attacks and did hand symbols. Crystal release, crystal needles. She shouted and fired at him. The man was hit in the shoulder by one but ignored the pain and blood seeping from his wound. Gurren dodged his wild attacks as his skin grew darker and he attacked more primal. You've lost yourself to that cult's ways haven't you? She said in disgust as he was nothing more than a mindless beast as he drew on it continuously. Be gone little imp. Crystal release, jade crystal wall. She focused it on the area around him and trapped and encased him in the crystal. That should deal with him. Suddenly to her surprise the crystal began cracking and he broke free with a roar. He began doing hand symbols of his own. Earth style. Fisher. He shouted and punched the ground and split it, shocking her. She lost her footing and fell through. She grabbed a rock at the last second. Earth style. Closing walls. He shouted and grabbing the two sides began to pull it back together. Gurren knew this would kill her and quickly activated her Kekai Genkai and forming picks climbed up and narrowly managed to get out of there before she would be crushed. Shingen roared at her and charged her when she leapt out of the way and he felt his feet hit against something. He looked down and saw that he had hit a mine. You shouldn't have come out so far by yourself. A voice said and he saw Asuma Sarutobi in front of him smoking a cigarette. No allies to help you out or save you. I'll kill you. Shingen roared at him. I think not, Asuma said and reached down and revealed that the ground he had been standing on was actually a tarp and he was in the middle of a minefield. Shingen's eyes widened at the deception. Asuma took a last puff of his cigarette and tossed it on the mines. The mines went off with him caught right in the middle of it, killing him. That takes care of that, Asuma said and took out another cigarette. Lurdum Lord Mitsunari. What are you doing? The men are confused. A snow nin shouted at the leader of snow who hadn't moved. Why haven't we moved our men into the battle? He asked. Shut up. Mitsunari snapped back, surprising him. He was grasping at his hands. Which is the better choice, the coalition or the Jushinists? He muttered to himself, unsure how to proceed. Sima Zan looked on at the field as there was no clear person who had the advantage. Kage-sama, Shingen has been slain. A Earth Nin reported to the Tsuchikage who paid no attention to it. Prepare the second wave. Smash right through all of them, Muda lead the force. He commanded and the swordsman nodded but Kage grabbed him by the shoulder. Remember, do not kill Naruto. He ordered him. Muda pulled away from and Kage went to prepare his next attack. Kuchio's no jutsu. Hidan shouted and he decapitated a sacrifice. Come forth my beast. He shouted and a large winged demon-like creature with one giant eye appeared and took to the air. The beast flapped its bat-like wings and opened its mouth and let out a loud shriek which affected the coalition members. Orochimaru seeing it prepared to deal with it personally when Jiraiya passed him. Let me handle this, Kuchio's no jutsu. He shouted and summoned a large toad. Not Gamabunta but one of his subordinates. Come here you overgrown cyclop rat with wings. Jiraiya shouted getting on top of it. The demon howled and let loose another high-pitched shriek. Jiraiya's toad summon lashed at it with his tongue but the beast avoided it. Hidan's summon was fast and able to dodge the attacks. HMPH, looks like we need a light. Jiraiya muttered to himself and the toad nodded and began making and storing oil. Jiraiya lit a paper bomb and threw it in its mouth and the toad let loose a giant fireball at it. The summon tried to dodge it but wasn't fast enough and was hit and it fell to the ground on flames. The beast tried to get up as one of its wings had been burned to a crisp by it when the sound of multiple chirping birds was heard. It lifted its head up and saw its demise. Chidori. Sasuke shouted and slammed the attack directly into its eye, killing it. Sasuke looked on at its corpse as it faded away, his eyes glowing red with the Sharingan. The battle went on as the second wave fought against the coalition. They were fighting a defensive battle hoping to wear them out and then send them running, but the sheer force of the attack and ferocity was keeping things difficult. No mercy was being shown to either side. Sekigahara was becoming as bloody as it had been hundreds of years ago. The Jushinists come on, uncaring that they had to climb over their dead to get to them. In fact they seemed to relish looking on at the sight of their dead comrades and enemies and only inspired them. Naruto dodged an attack and doing hand symbols did his Odo Kage Bushin no Jutsu, creating hundreds of clones to even the odds. Beside him Tayuya cast a genjutsu on them to overwhelm the enemy. Sakura was with them as well, working as a medic. She saw a group starting to overpower Kiba and Zaku and she reached towards her pocket. Sakura blizzard technique. She shouted and threw multiple kunai attached to bags filled with cherry blossom petals. She then threw another kunai at the bags and they went off as they were actually explosive tags in them as well, catching them in a large blast. Kill enough and the bastards should run off. Tayuya shouted as they fought. Lu Xiaong growled looking on as he was being held back from participating in the fight. I will not be held back in this battle. I will prove my might to all in the land that I am the most powerful warrior alive. He shouted and grasping his halberd so tightly his knuckles turned white mounted his own horse and ignoring the cries of the others charged heading towards the center, going against the Tsuchikage's orders but none dared to hold him back. Or try to stop him. Muta Daidoji faced against a group of Anbuan samurai by himself and he held out Satsugaisha in front of him daring them to attack him. They charged him and he blocked and parried and countered their attacks. The swordsman cut them down with no hesitation, each one becoming another kill of his Nodashi. He looked at his sword and saw it start to glow with blue flames. He knew what that meant. He turned his head and saw far away at the other side of the field Naruto fighting well against his opponents. The boy oblivious that he was there. "Now I shall end this," he said when more samurai appeared in his path. Glaring at them for getting in his way. "Enough of this," he said and channeled chakra into his sword. "Wind blade," he shouted and let loose with a powerful slash. The samurai were unprepared for his attack and each one was hit and their armor was cut through and each one spilled blood from their fatal wounds and fell to the ground. Sakin and Ukin were fighting against a group of earth nins when suddenly they were attacked from behind by Kanbei, no longer on his rhino. "Hitting a guy from behind, that's pretty dirty," Sakin shouted and he and Ukin's bodies become covered with markings and attacked him. Kanbei activated his own cursed seal and did hand symbols and like before in his previous fights against Naruto slammed his hands into the ground which stretched out underneath and grabbed him by the ankles. "Kill him," he ordered the others who slowly stalked their way towards him. Sakin and Ukin had beads of sweat on their faces but then activated the second stage of their cursed seal surprising Kanbei as their bodies transformed into a red color like an ogre and they grew fangs. "Now you've pissed both of us off," Ukin shouted and the two broke free of his grip as they attacked the earth nins. Fighting together in the same body the two fought back to back against them as they beat them down. "They're demons," one shouted falling to the ground fear in his eyes. Kanbei growled in irritation and entered the fray. Casting a jutsu he created a dark ball and threw it at them. "Kuchio's no jutsu, Rashomon," Sakin shouted and summoned a large gate with a demon's face on it which blocked the attack although it was dented. "Not bad, not many are strong enough to dent this," Sakin said to him. Kanbei leapt up over the gate surprising them and slashed at them with a kunai which they blocked. Ukin then slugged him in the face but only got a laugh in return from him. "Think that's funny, eh?" Ukin said and suddenly he disappeared from Sakin's body and reappeared inside Kanbei's body surprising him. "What trickery is this?" Kanbei shouted feeling his body grow weaker. "My ultimate technique with this I can slowly kill any enemy by invading their body and breaking it down piece by piece, cell by cell." Ukin explained to him a grin on his face. "Rot in hell motherfucker." He taunted him as Kanbei fell to one knee and coughed up blood feeling his body being torn apart on the inside. "What fun, what a brilliant technique," Kanbei said unexpectedly. "I must say I'll remember this in my last remaining moments of life and in the next one as well. But I'm not going to hell by myself, it'll be too boring." He shouted and reached towards his vest and opened it. Sakin and Ukin gasped in shock and horror at what he saw. He had a C4 strapped to his chest. "I'll take both of you with me," he shouted and in his last moments of strength got up and grabbed Sakin in a bear hug. Before either of the brothers could do anything he activated it and it went off, killing all three of them. When the explosion cleared their bodies were shown, back in their original state. Tsunade, Jiraiya, Naruto, and the others looked on in shock at the explosion that had destroyed everything in its radius. "Now," Kage said finishing his preparations. "Now the true battle begins." The Battle of Sekigahara raged on. Chapter 83. The sounds and cries of the wounded and the dying echoed throughout the area as the battle raged on at Sekigahara. No mercy was being given between the two forces as they fought each other. Blood soaked the ground as bodies littered the ground. Naruto Uzumaki fighting with Tayuya at his side dodged an attack and prepared a jutsu. "Futon. Daitapa," he shouted casting it and sent the jutsu at the Jishinists and blew them away. He wiped sweat off his forehead and caught his breath. "Catapults," a shinobi shouted as they were fired again. "Damn it. Get the hell out of the way." Tayuya cursed and the group scattered trying to avoid being crushed by them as the giant boulders fell from the sky. After it had passed Naruto suddenly heard many barking sounds. "Oh no, not those again," he muttered as he looked in the distance and saw several demonic-like hounds running at them. He remembered them back at the attack on Konoha by Hidan as they were summoned beasts and dangerous. Elsewhere, an allied force was winning the battle against the Jashinists and Earth Ninja and sending them running in retreat, having defeated them. The group cheered upon their victory, seeing that the advantage was theirs. Suddenly they heard a sound and they turned and saw a lone figure riding towards him, a halberd gripped in his hand as he charged them. They threw shuriken and kunai at him, but he deflected them with no effort and continued to charge them. "Now you die." Wu Xiang shouted and swung his blade and sent 5 all at once flying into the air with one blow. The warrior dismounted and smashed into them like a tidal wave as their formations crumbled against him. Wu Xiang scattered them and broke any defensive positions apart as he scattered them. All who came at him fell and fell hard as he batted numerous of them away with one swing of his weapon. Thrown away due to his sheer force, even kicked high into the air as none could withstand his power. Single-handedly he defeated them. "Come on!" he roared and swung his halberd into the ground. "If you weaklings want to die, then come fight me," he yelling, daring them to fight him. More came at him and he let out a powerful roar like that of a lion and sent them backwards. No blade got past his defenses and no jutsu would slow him down either. "Feel the power of the greatest warrior in all the land," Wu Xiang shouted, facing Anbu. "Sky Piercer," he shouted, and his halberd glowed and he threw it upwards into the sky and let out beams of red energy from it, hitting them. His halberd fell and he grasped it. "He must be stopped," Kakashi said, looking on afar, seeing how single-handedly he was turning the tide of battle and inspiring the Jashinists. He had to find a way to bring down the mighty warrior. The 3 Kages, Tsunade, Orochimaru, and Gaara looked as the fight progressed on. There was no clear decisive winner going on as the battle raged on. "Our forces are evenly matched right now, but this is only a fourth of their army that is fighting. If they send their entire force right now, they'll be overrun and slaughtered," Orochimaru said as he looked on. "And Snow still refuses to take part and get involved," he muttered, looking on at the Snow force which hadn't moved an inch. "You're right, send the signal to bring them all back and behind the barrier. We'll regroup and tire them out trying to get to us. They can't get past the barrier," Tsunade responded to him. Gaara made hand seals and a giant pillar of sand shot out of the ground beside him and continued rising upwards. Baki cut an Earth Ninja's throat and looked and saw it. "That's the signal, pull back. Pull back behind the barrier," he called out to them all. The coalition heeded his words and withdrew from the fight, outpacing their enemies as they made a quick retreat and were able to make it to safety. "Get the wounded tended to, Shizune, rotate fresh medics in and out," Tsunade ordered to her apprentice, who with Sakura, Ino, wear part of the medical corps to tend to the wounded. "I want everyone that is still capable of fighting to be healed and ready. No one moves beyond the barrier until we give the command," Orochimaru ordered. "We'll wait them out and force them to tire themselves," he said as again the Jashinists slammed into the barrier with their catapults and ballistas but failed to penetrate. They could not break through as Tsunade's barrier was too strong. Naruto caught his breath and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "So far so good," he said in between breaths. "We got a lot of work to do yet," he said as with him was Tayuya and others. "Brother," he heard a voice and turned and saw Haku walk towards him. "Are you all right? Rest yourself." "I'm fine, Haku, we just need to recover a bit," Naruto said to him in response. He looked over at the others and saw the wounded being tended to. "We lost Sakin and Ukin though, and I'm afraid the casualty list will be higher when this is over with. It'll do you no good to overthink things," Jiraiya said to him. "Take this matter one enemy at a time. That's one of the lessons Sarutobi told us in our youth," he said to him, and Naruto nodded. "Well, so far the bottle's ours at the moment. The problem though is that there may be too many of them for our strategies to handle," Dosu Kinuta said, looking out at the field. "Especially if Snow gets involved as well," Shikamaru pointed out as well. He looked over at his teammates and sensei, a part of him wondering just how many of them would survive this day. Lord Mitsunari," the Snow Nin said to the leader who stared out into the distance. "Earth is demanding our immediate entry into battle." Sima Zun the strategist looked on as the young ruler of Snow hadn't moved a muscle, instead looking out into the field with a blank look in his eye. Flashback. "What happened here, where all the people?" Mitsunari asked as the Snow Force was hours away from joining the Earth Force at Sekigahara. He stood in the ruins of a town that had been destroyed. "The Jashinists did this, a small party, perhaps 100. Sima Zun said to him, standing with him. "What makes you say that?" "Look," he responded and pointed in the distance. Mitsunari, not understanding, looked and his eye widened at what he saw. Dozens of men, women, and children had been killed and were piled up on top of another. No mercy shown to any of them. At the very top of the pile, impaled on a man, was a banner with the symbol of Jashin on it. Mitsunari stared in shock at what he saw, not expecting this. Burn it. The strategist beside him ordered 2 snow nins, giving them orders. Set it all to flame. Mitsunari watched on as they burned the pile of bodies. Clearly this is the type of world we'll live in if the Jashinists win. Sima said and turned and left. Present. Mitsunari looked on at the field, still not moving as he watched on. You failed. Hidan yelled at Raiga Kurosuke over his forces being defeated. Make amends with your miserable life. He snarled and prepared to kill him. Raiga pulled out his swords in response, ready to defend himself. Enough, Kage Sosano's voice called out. The Tsuchikage stepped forward. This means nothing, this was just a test. But we lost Shingen and Kanbei. Gongzan Tachibana said to him. Ori was with him and she nodded as well. That hardly matters. He responded with no emotion as they had regrouped as well. We can't break through their miserable barrier, it'll take hours to even dent it. Da Zhao said in irritation. Leave that to me, Kage said and stepped forward. Nothing can stand against Jashin, this will be his world. He proclaimed and his rings glowed as he channeled his energy. Focusing all his power, he fired them as the wind picked up. Kuchio's no jutsu. Come forth, set. He shouted and suddenly 100 of his troops were set aflame and disappeared, being used as a sacrifice. A bolt of lightning hit him and then shot forward towards the barrier. It grew bigger and bigger and began taking the shape of a ghastly skeletal-like man. What in the world? Naruto shouted in shock, looking up at the giant blue summon which towered over them and was larger than the field. A pair of coal-black eyes stared down upon them with contempt and the symbol of Jashin was on its forehead. Set raised a fist and slammed it against the barrier, letting out a demonic roar as it shook. Hidan cackled upon seeing it. Yes, destroy them all. He shouted, seeing it, the ultimate summon of Jashin forged from his own flesh and blood. Set, Jashin's own son who he killed to create as a summon. Orochimaru said as he remembered what the book had said. He had used his own son to create as a summon. Set slammed his fists into the barrier, roaring with each blow. It then opened its mouth and let loose a powerful beam of energy into it. The Hokage's eyes widened in realization that it wouldn't hold. He's breaking it. Strengthen the barrier. Tsunade shouted in shock and horror as it was weakening it with each blow. Set then roared and grasped the barrier with both hands and then tore it apart as if it was paper, shattering it. His task fulfilled, the summon let loose another roar and disappeared, but the damage had been done as now nothing could stop their attacks. Kill them, Kage ordered his entire army. Kill them all. Move. Jiraiya shouted as they were fired at again. The coalition scattered as rains of bolts and boulders came down upon them. Some were unlucky and were impaled and crushed. Temari and Kankuro along with Kin and Neji saw they were about to be impaled by dozens of bolts when Gaara appeared in front of them and performed hand symbols and created a wave of sand to cover and save them. Attack! Hidan shouted and at once the entire army charged, prepared to cut down everything in its path. Fire! Orochimaru ordered and they fired into them, but the sea of humanity could not be stopped. Now! Shikamaru shouted, seeing they had no choice, and suddenly a wave of flames leapt up in between the earth force, cutting them effectively in half. He had always been concerned what would happen should the barrier fall. He had set up a task force and had them spread oil around the field and placed a sealed tag on it. Should they cross it, it would activate and flames would sprout up. The Earth army was cut in half and separated, but the force that had gotten through kept on charging. Charge! Kakashi shouted and the coalition charged as well, entering the fray as the two forces smashed into one another. It was a wild and crazy scene as the battle was joined between them. Naruto ducked a swing and punched an enemy in the face. He then turned and casted a sound jutsu on an enemy, knocking him back. Suddenly he felt the earth shake beneath him and he turned his head and saw 5 earth nins in the process of casting a jutsu. Oh no, you don't! He shouted, prepared to stop them, but he couldn't reach them in time and the earth suddenly split in two between him and he fell downwards. He plummeted downwards and at the last second grabbed a rock and looked up and saw the crack disappear. Crap, I'm gonna run out of air at this rate, they're trying to suffocate me. He said to himself and he brought his thumb up and bit it. Extreme decapitating airwaves. Zaku shouted, thrusting his palms out, and fired his attack full blast at a group of Jashinists, sending them flying through the air. "This is crazy," he muttered, clutching his spear. He heard a sound and he turned and saw Lee having kicked an enemy who was about to attack him. "You shouldn't take your eyes off your foes, Zaku. I'm winning at this rate." "Oh yeah, we'll see about that." Zaku shouted and rejoined the battle, not to be outdone. Anko dodged an attack and saw Iruka, who tossed unlit paper bombs at her. She grabbed them in midair and charged at a group. She seemingly phased right through them and none of them were hit or suffered a wound. Not understanding, the group charged the kunoichis back to them, seemingly unconcerned. Boom! The paper bombs she had gotten went off as she had lit them and placed one on each of them. "Alright, time to introduce you to some of my friends. Kuchio's no jutsu," she shouted and summoned a pair of giant blue snakes. A pair of purple snakes appeared as well, and she knew that Orochimaru had summoned them. Kimimaro Kage fought on, the last user of Shikatsumyaku, using his clan's mixture of savageness and elegance to become a cyclone of death to anyone who got too close. Kaden. Neji shouted and spun, deflecting attacks. His Byakugan activated. The prodigy of the Hyuga clan fought with Shino and Kiba, who with Akamaru had transformed into a two-headed giant wolf. However, among the Earth Nins was a man who was more than a simple ninja. Lu Xiang roared and made his way through. He had gotten through and was going through everything in his path, cutting them down. He charged and dashed right through a group of Anbu, knocking right up into the air and landing with thuds on the ground. He hacked and slashed his way through, his halberd in hand, as he cut through them single-handedly. "I'll stop you," Asuma shouted, leaping at him and slashed at him with his trench knives. Lu Xiang blocked it and smirked, amused, and threw him off his halberd. Asuma landed on his feet and charged him, preparing a jutsu. "Fool. Do you think me for a simpleton? Sky Piercer," Lu Xiang said, and threw his halberd, which again fired off bursts of energy. Asuma was fortunate to dodge that one, as that would have killed him. He ran towards him and leapt up and dropkicked him in the chest. To his surprise, he didn't budge an inch. "Sensei!" Choji shouted, and he took one of his family's pills and he grew even larger and went into his ball mode. "Meat tank!" he shouted and rolled at him. Lu Xiang didn't move. In fact, his smirk grew and he thrusted out his arms as Choji attempted to crush. "I won't let you hurt him," Choji shouted, rolling at him, trying to crush him underneath him as they pitted each other's strength against each other. But Lu Xiang only gave a roar and, to the shock of all watching, lifted Choji up despite his efforts and tossed him high up into the air. Lu Xiang then leapt up and delivered a mighty kick, causing Choji to scream in pain and go back to his regular form as he landed with a thud. "Choji, you bastard!" Asuma shouted, seeing him wounded, and charged him, intent on cutting him down. Lu Xiang then cast one of his own jutsus and swung his halberd, and the force of it created a burst of wind which knocked Asuma onto his back. "Now you die!" Lu Xiang shouted and stabbed him in the chest with the front of his halberd, killing him. Or so he thought. When in truth he actually killed a Jashinist who got too close, as Kurenai had cast a genjutsu to disguise him as Asuma. Asuma got up, focusing his thoughts as Lu Xiang held his weapon in his hands. Suddenly a genin charged past him. "Chidori!" Sasuke shouted, aiming his attack at him, but like he tried before, Lu Xiang only blocked it, shocking Sasuke and sent it flying into the air. "Is this it? Is this all the leaf can give me?" he said, taunting him and the others. "Enough, I will fight you," a voice said, and he turned and saw standing before him Hatake Kakashi. "Your rampage ends here. I'll stop you here and now." "Sensei, I can beat him," Sasuke protested. "No, you already used the Chidori twice today, do it again and it'll cripple you. Take the others and get them tended too, I'll deal with this mad beast," Kakashi said to him, and Sasuke reluctantly did so. "I've heard of you, they say you have 1,000 techniques and jutsus you stole from your enemies," Lu Xiang said, as it was just the two of them. "More like copy, but to each their own," Kakashi responded. "A warrior of your strength and power, and yet you waste it fighting for the Jashinists when you could save the world with your power instead of destroying it. I never took you to be a cultist." Lu Xiang only laughed. "Cultist? You're a fool. I don't fight for Jashin, I don't fight for Iwagakure either, I just fight," he said to Kakashi. "Battle is the only thing I crave and desire. I care less about the reasons man fight. I fight for neither good nor do I fight for evil. I am beyond such idiotic notions. I fight only to test myself and prove my worth as the most powerful warrior in the land. Nothing excites me more than being in the thick of battle." Why bother fighting for such foolish and petty reasons such as money and land? You could just be like me if you put aside your hesitation and embraced and enjoy the carnage of battle like I have done so. He said and charged him, and Kakashi dodged it. Very well, let's begin. Haku was fighting against members of the Kurosuke family with Tenten and others at his side when a bolt of lightning went past him. He turned and saw Raiga standing before him, Rinmara strapped to his back. I will have your head, and Zabuza's weapon. Raiga said to him, his blades charging with electricity. Haku gripped the Zanbato tightly and motioned for the others to leave. The other Kurosuke members left as well, just leaving them there by each other. Elsewhere, a giant black snake shot out of the ground, and on top of it was Naruto, having used a summon to escape his potential burial. He dispelled it and looked around and saw the armies fighting. He saw that the army that had been cut off was starting to get through, and he was behind them. If they did, they would overwhelm them and kill everyone. Tayuya, Haku, Anko, Otusan, all of them. They would all be killed. I gotta find a way to break through and stop them. If they get through, it's all over. He said and reached towards and withdrew Kusanagi from its sheath. I gotta stop them, no matter the cost. He said, and his eyes turned red as he drew upon Kyuubi's power. A tail sprouted out of him and a fox-shaped aura took around him. The force was prepared to make its way and join the fight through. The ones in the back heard something coming. A group turned and their eyes widened as their image reflected off of the blade and were cut down instantaneously by Naruto. Get out of my way! Naruto shouted and attacked them. The Jushinists, turning around and seeing him, aimed their weapons at him, looking to cut them down. Either aided by skill, the gods, or Kyuubi, not one attack reached or touched his body. Tsuchikage, our force is being attacked by a possessed demon. Gonzan Tachibana said to Kage. Kage looked out and was surprised to see Naruto by himself fighting against tens of thousands of his men. Don't kill him, he shouted, as it would ruin his plans if he died. Naruto ducked an attack and grabbed an enemy and threw him into a crowd. Attacks came at him and he blocked them with Kusanagi. He was surrounded on all sides and being pushed back. He blocked several attacks but was being pressed into a disadvantage and being piled on by them. Refusing to submit, he let out a cry and a second tail emerged, and giving a great heave tossed dozens of them into the air, breaking free. Howling Wolf no Jutsu, he shouted, and taking a deep breath let out a powerful scream at them. More came at him but he dodged the attacks and jutsus they threw at him as he used Kyuubi's power. What the? Jiraiya said, and his eyes widened at what he saw. Holy hell, how did Naruto get over there? He said upon seeing Naruto right in the middle of it. His face turned into a grin. Hey, looks like Otos somehow got themselves their own yellow flash. He then grinned and summoned a large toad. Gamabunta, let's give him a hand, shall we? He said, seated on top of it. The toad leapt and Jiraiya began forming a spiral ball in his hands. Rasengan, he shouted and threw it right into a group of enemies, scattering them. Die. Several earth nins shouted and fired rocks at him and hit him, causing a dust cloud to appear. They smirked, thinking they got him, when Naruto unharmed charged out of there and slammed his fist into one of them's face. Full moon slash, he shouted, and drawing a moon with his sword sent it right at them, slamming into them. Kuchio's no Jutsu. Manda, he shouted, slicing his hand with his sword. A great cloud of smoke appeared in the middle of them, and when it disappeared, Naruto was shown standing on a gigantic purple snake's head. I need your assistance. And you shall have it, young master. Manda proclaimed, sensing the boy's power that he could respect, and the Lord of Snakes swung his tail and smashed several enemies with it and bashed his head into the ground, sending enemies flying. Give me a light, Manda shouted, and Naruto threw an explosive tag into his mouth. The snake then let loose a powerful flame, incinerating them. Orochimaru looked on and saw Naruto standing on Manda's head, the boy having summoning him successfully. A sense of pride swelled up within him as he watched, feeling more proud of his son than he had ever before. Manda swung his tail and sent more flying. The force, rather than right such a powerful summon, began retreating, being routed from the right. That miserable brat's running our plan. Hidan shouted in fury, looking on. Enough, I'll see to it that he'll never interfere ever again. He snarled and went to put his own plan in place. Naruto got off of Manda and dispelled him and went to join up with the others, having seen them fled. His features had returned to normal as he saw he didn't need to rely on the Kyuubi's power for now. As he was about to join them, he felt a presence and slowly he drew out Kusanagi upon sensing who it was. Muda, he said, and his eyes narrowed upon seeing his longtime nemesis. The swordsman stood across from his, holding in his hands his nodashi, which glowed intensely as if it was on fire. At long last we shall end our feud and rivalry this day. At the end of this day, one of us will be dead. Muda said to him, "You're right, one of us will be dead." Naruto said in all seriousness. "And I guarantee it will be you." Muda and Naruto stared at each other, the two longtime enemies gripping their blades. Kage says you have the power to change the world, but he is a fool. There is nothing special about you, and I shall prove it at the end of the fight. Remember the Chunin exams? Naruto asked him. I made an oath that I would kill you. For all of the people who killed and harmed, including my friends, I will fulfill that oath today. The two looked at one another and then charged each other. As that happened, the snake Sannin was giving commands when he felt a presence. He turned and saw a white-haired man standing in front of him clutching a three-bladed scythe. Hidan, he spat out in disgust. We are similar, Orochimaru. We both left our original villages cause we were sick of how things were being made, and we both left Akatsuki as well once they suited our purposes. Hidan said to him, maybe so, but that is where the similarities end. Whilst I have found redemption, you have found nothing but solace in your fanaticism to that insane god of yours. Hidan laughed and grinned at him. The past does bring back many memories, let's revisit this one. He shouted, and speaking in a language Orochimaru didn't understand, slammed his scythe into the ground. Suddenly a portal appeared behind him and he leapt into it. Orochimaru then found himself unable to resist as the portal began sucking him up as well. As it happened, Naruto and Muda charged each other and Lu Xiang swung at Kakashi. Slowly they and everyone else at Sekigahara began to slow down as if freezing to a halt. Orochimaru struggled to resist it when he was taken off his feet and was sent into the portal, not knowing where he would go. Orochimaru's body hit the ground hard, landing with a thud. The snake Sannin grunted and forcibly pulled himself up to all fours. He lifted his head and his eyes widened at what he saw. It can't be, he shouted in disbelief as he saw before him in the distance the carved faces of the past 4 Hokages. Konoha, what am I doing here? He said to himself, unable to understand what was happening. He heard a monstrous roar and he turned around and his jaw dropped in disbelief at what he was seeing. Standing amongst a field of carnage with shattered buildings and dead bodies was a gigantic 9-tailed fox which let out a roar and destroyed another building with its paw. The beast was destroying all in its path, and many civilians were fleeing in terror and panic, trying to save their loved ones and their families from certain doom. Several ninja tried to stop the beast, but they were wiped out by its power. How? What is going on here? He said to himself when something caught his eye. A dark-haired man with golden eyes leapt down in front of the demon fox and bit his thumb and summoned a giant snake and stood face to face with it. That's me. I'm in the past. He said as he knew this day. A day he never forgot. He heard a cruel mocking laughter and he whipped his head around and saw Hidan standing on top of a building. Does this place bring back any memories, Snake? I used my time jutsu to bring us both back here to this specific date. Hidan taunted. You know what this day is, don't you? October 10th, the day of the Kyuubi attack, the day Naruto was born. Orochimaru said to himself. His past self was fighting the Kyuubi in the distance. That's right, the day your damn brat was born, screaming into this world. A day you barely even know the truth about. Hidan taunted him, laughing. I have brought you here to witness your greatest failure. What are you talking about? Orochimaru snarled at him. He had re-witnessed this day numerous times, in his nightmares. Look, Hidan said, and Orochimaru saw Minato Namikaze, a hardened look on his face as he held a bundle in his arms looking on. Regret was in his eyes as he stared at the young infant, but knew what had to be done. After your pathetic attempt to stop Kyuubi, Minato took your wretched son and used him as a vessel to trap Kyuubi. But, he said, and an evil grin appeared on his face. If Minato would be prevented from doing so, Naruto would be killed in the chaos. And if he dies here in the past, he'll die as well in the present. Orochimaru's eyes widened at what he said. I'll change the past and not only kill your son right in front of you, but also allow Kyuubi to destroy Konoha as well, then nothing could stop Jashin's conquest. Laughing madly, the insane man dashed away, heading towards where Minato was at. No! Orochimaru shouted and ran after him. He had to stop him, he had to save his son in the present. Unaware of what was happening, Minato looked on as Orochimaru's attempts to stop Kyuubi ended in failure and he was knocked off of his snake. Knowing what he had to do, but with a heavy heart, he looked down at the child. The child of the man he hated, but the love he had for the boy's mother was far stronger than his hate. He reached towards his thumb and started to bite it. Hidan laughed insanely as he was nearing him and leapt up and prepared to throw his scythe and kill them both from behind. Before he could, he was tackled out of the air and his assaulter slammed him onto the roof of a building. Hidan peered up from the rabble and sneered when he saw Orochimaru standing before him, Kusanagi in his hands, a look of murderous rage in his eyes. You damn bastard, you just don't know when to quit. Hidan snarled at him and sprung up. I will not let you harm Naruto. Orochimaru shouted and slashed at him and Hidan blocked it. I hurt and kill who I please. The maggots of this entire world will be sacrificed to Jashin. Starting with your miserable son and you. He shouted and swung at him to take his head off. Orochimaru dodged it and thrust at him, which Hidan evaded. Die. Hidan shouted and doing hand symbols cast a jutsu and summoned several floating skulls and they flew at Orochimaru, who dodged them and they exploded upon contact. Multiple shadow snake fists. Orochimaru shouted and several snakes shot out of his arms and attempted to bite Hidan, who retaliated by lopping off their heads with his scythe. Orochimaru began doing more hand symbols and cast another jutsu which hit Hidan, who shrugged it off. Fool! You've forgotten that I am immortal. Hidan taunted him. The blessing of Jashin is I, his right hand has filled me with more power than you could dream of. You idiotic bastard could never comprehend the gifts he's. You preach too much. Orochimaru interrupted and he tossed Kusanagi into the air and caught it with his tongue, which he outstretched and slashed at Hidan, aiming to take his head off. Hidan dodged it. Insolent wretch. I should have killed you the moment I first laid eyes on you back in AIM 12 years ago. Hidan snarled. Jashin style. Rain of fire. He shouted and tossed his weapon into the air and fireballs come down from it at Orochimaru, who leapt into the air to avoid them. You die. Hidan shouted and appeared in front of him, scythe in hand, and slashed at him right across the stomach, cutting him in half. Hidan landed and laughed. He turned and looked and saw Minato in the process of summoning the toad boss Gamabunta. Now then, to make sure that that bastard doesn't seal Kyuubi ga. He was interrupted when a blade stabbed into his back from behind and burst through his chest. He turned his head and saw Orochimaru, his body back together. What? I've learned a few years back how to put my body back together even if I should be cut in two. Orochimaru said to him and smirked. You can thank Kakuzu, as I was quite interested in his own body and developed my own way of pulling myself back together. Hidan roared and turned and slashed at his head. Orochimaru ducked it and gripping the blade handle twisted it and threw him against a fence. He heard a roar and he turned and saw Minato on top of Gamabunta confronting the Kyuubi, a bundle in his arms. Past. Orochimaru was struggling against Tsunade's and Jiraiya's hold against him as he struggled to break free and save his son, as he wasn't going to let that happen. He was not going to let his son be used as nothing more than a vessel. However, as he struggled, he saw in the distance something that caught his eye. A person who looked just like him, only slightly older. The sight confused him as he could have sworn that that was him just now. He heard another roar and saw Minato begin the sealing process, and he continued to struggle trying to break free. Present Orochimaru gritted his teeth looking on. This could be his chance, he could change the future as well. Make it so Naruto never had to become a Jinchuriki or had to endure all those hated glares for so long. He could summon Manda right now and have him restrain them while he got him. So focused on it, he was unaware of a threat approaching behind him. The scythe came at his head and he just narrowly dodged it in time, as that would have taken off his head. He turned and saw Hidan, an insane look in his cruel eyes. Jashin style. Skeletal hands. He shouted and several hands made of bone appeared and grabbed Orochimaru. Jashin style. Spear of agony. A black barbed-wired tipped spear appeared in his hands and Hidan charged him, intent on skewering him. Orochimaru struggled and managed to break his hands free at the last second and quickly did hand symbols. Wind style. Tornado hold. He shouted and from his hands came forth a small tornado which went up into the air with Hidan in it, trapping him in it. Water style. Imprisonment. He shouted and casting another jutsu trapped Hidan in a cube full of water. Hidan struggled to get free to no avail. That should hold a wild animal like yourself. Orochimaru said looking on. Suddenly he was stabbed in the arm from behind and turned and saw Hidan, his scythe dripping with his blood. He turned his head and saw the one trapped had disappeared. A decoy, he muttered, realizing it had been a clone he had trapped. Gahahaha. Hidan laughed insanely as he stood upon the symbol of Jashin he had drawn. Now you shall die, he said, and licked the blood, and his body transformed black and white, making him look like a skeleton. Now then, what first? I think I'll go with the heart, he exclaimed, and went to stab himself in the chest and also kill Orochimaru as well. Suddenly the portal that had brought them here appeared behind him. What? He shouted as it had stopped him. No, it can't be time already, he shouted, and he was being forcefully dragged into it and was taken out of his symbol, restoring him back to his original state. No, damn it, this can't be happening, he exclaimed as he stabbed his scythe into the ground to keep him in the past. I won't let this stop me from killing you, he exclaimed, and slowly made his way forward back to the symbol. Orochimaru, knowing he couldn't let that happen, began channeling chakra into his hand. Kurai Rasengan, he shouted, and threw the attack at him, which hit him in the chest and knocked him loose and back into the portal, taking him back to the present. Orochimaru went to follow him but stopped and looked. In the distance he could see Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Sarutobi. The old man holding a small crying bundle in his arms, looking down on him with pity and sadness. Minato's body was on the ground, having sealed Kyuubi into the child, giving his life in the process. Knowing his opportunity had gone, Orochimaru let out a resigned sigh and entered the portal as well, heading back to the present, knowing he had changed nothing. Back in the present, as if time had finally gone by, Naruto and Muta's swords clashed against each other as they begun their fight. Kakashi dodged Liu Xiao's attacks, keeping away from the mighty warrior. A portal opened and Hidan was flung out of it and landed on his back. The Jashinist cursed to himself as his plan had been foiled and pulled himself up. Hidan. A voice called out, and he saw Orochimaru land on his feet as the portal disappeared behind him. It's time we finish this, he said, Kusanagi in his hands. Hidan growled and gripped his scythe so tight his knuckles lost all blood in them. So the snake thinks he has become a damn dragon. I will kill you 1,000 times this day, he shouted and charged him. At the snow camp, Mitsunari, have you made your decision? Sima Zun asked the quiet ruler of snow. I have, he said, and made his way forward to the front. All the eyes of his army were on him now as he stared out to the field with his one eye. He drew out his sword and cut down a Jashin banner that had been set up. My people, he exclaimed to them all. We have been lied and deceived. It is not the ways of Jashin that will bring our country to prosperity. The white tiger will not stand to live in such a world, he said to them all. This war has gone on for a fool's age, and our involvement in it ends this day. He hoisted his sword in the air and pointed at the battlefield where the forces still fought. I, Mitsunari, leader of the Chono clan and ruler of the hidden snow village, declare that we break our ties in alliance with Iwagakure and the Tsuchikage. We shall aid the coalition. Forward, to battle, he shouted, and his men grasped their weapons, and with their leader in front of them the 15,000 plus snow army charged, entering the battle at long last. Chapter 84. Kusanagi and Satsugaisha clashed against one another, steel against steel, as the wielders glared at each other full of hatred as Naruto and Muta's duel began. The two sworn enemies at last fighting one another. Muta's Nodashi glowed with an intense blue color as if the enchanted blade wanted nothing more than to stab itself into Naruto's heart. Again and again their weapons clashed against each other as the two battled. No quarter would be given and none would be taken. One will stand, one will fall. Naruto blocked an attack and swung his sword at him, which Muta dodged. Muta slashed at him and Naruto evaded it. He then started to prepare hand symbols. Futon. Daitapa. He shouted and fired the jutsu, which Muta countered with a barrier, multiple sound bullets. He shouted and fired multiple attacks at Muta, who dodged and evaded each one, showing great speed as not one hit him. My turn. Muta shouted and pulled out a scroll and summoned several blades and tossed them into the air and did one-handed symbols. Spider arms. 6 extra arms sprouted and he caught the blades and then charged and attacked Naruto. Naruto was barely able to move out of the way as Muta attacked him with all 8 weapons. He dodged and weaved through the attacks as Muta was relentless, fully intent on skewering him with them. Damn, never seen a jutsu like this, Naruto thought to himself as he dodged and created Bushin clones, but Muta sliced them apart and was not affected by the sonic booms. Naruto however during that caught something. When he attacked them he only used his Nodashi and a Wakizashi to take them out. The other blades he didn't use and it didn't make sense he had been surrounded on all sides and only used those two blades. A genjutsu, Naruto realized it and then charged him. Muta went to stab him but he dodged the attacks and struck at him and Muta blocked it with the Wakizashi and it shattered no much for Naruto's blade. The other blades and arms disappeared as well. Muta snarled at him and prepared more hand symbols and sent a wave of energy at him from his sword. Naruto leapt up and dodged it and threw multiple shurikens and kunai laced with paper bombs and explosive tags at him and Muta dodged them and leapt at him and attacked him. "Your life ends this day," he shouted as they were in midair. "Not before yours." Naruto responded and they hit the ground and again charged at one another. Their swords clashed and clanged against one another as they fought. Naruto charged chakra into his sword and sent an kenjutsu at him which Muta countered by charging chakra into his own and overwhelmed it with his own as they resumed their duel to the death. Elsewhere, Might Guy fighting with his team and Shino and Kiba heard the sounds of many people and he turned his head and saw the snow force charging at him. He looked on rare dismay in his face as that was too many, even for him. He and the others here would be overwhelmed. No matter though, he gritted his teeth and got into a fighting stance as they came at him. "Alright then, let's see how many if you fall before my youthful spirit," he shouted ready to fight and die a glorious death as they charged him. He raised his fists up ready to hit the first challenger. They came at him and to his surprise they charged right past him paying him no mind. Confusion sprawled across his face as they seemingly ignored him. "Hey, I'm right here," he shouted in protest as they passed him by. He turned and his eyes widened as he saw the snow force attack the earth nins and Jashinists, attacking their former allies and cutting them down with no hesitation. "Tsuchikage!" A panicked Gongzan Tachibana exclaimed to Kage. "The snow force has defected." Kage didn't say anything, it appeared as if he didn't even hear him. "Lady Tsunade!" Shizune shouted running towards the Hokage. "Snow has began fighting against Earth." "I see, so they made their move after all," Tsunade said as that turned the tide of battle. The snow force, 15,000 strong slammed into the Iowa force from behind cutting them down. In the lead was Mitsunari Chono, the one-eyed white tiger fighting in the front with his men as they turned against their former allies. The Jashinists did not expect this and many were cut down without raising their weapons thinking they had come to aid them. "Push forward men," Mitsunari shouted as they attacked fighting with the ferocity of tigers as the coalition seeing it re-entered the fray. Using his bloodline, he froze the flood and trapped several enemies. "Kage-sama, what do we do?" Gongzan shouted in panic. "The troops are being routed," Ori shouted looking on as their forces were being pressed on from both sides. "Enough," Kage said and stood forward and his rings glowed. "Jashin style, fall of the heavens," he shouted and the sky above the battlefield turned red and a giant rock fell to the ground and exploded on impact crushing and killing several from all three sides. "Tsuchikage!" A voice ordered and a group of snow samurai marched forward as due to sending his entire force out, he was alone with few guards. "Surrender immediately and withdraw from the field. You shall be held accountable for all you've done and the treachery you've committed," the leader of the group said to him as they drew their swords. "You dare command me?" Kage said, his voice growing deeper and more ominous. His rings glowed and he fired out beams from them and killed them all on impact, destroying them as they turned to dust. His few remaining guards including Dajel looked on in shock. "I grow weary of this battle," he said distastefully as the dead and losses were meaningless to him. Other battles raged on as well. Orochimaru and Hidan battled each other with ferocity and killing intent that could be felt for miles as the two fought. Each one countered the other's attacks and jutsus, able to escape from the jaws of defeat at the last second. Hidan threw a spear at him and Orochimaru blocked it by using snakes to form a barrier. He prepared a jutsu and fired and Hidan took the hit but due to his immortality survived it showing no worse for wear. "Die bastard," Hidan shouted as he threw his scythe at him. Orochimaru dodged it and lashed out his tongue extending it and it turned into a snake which attempted to bite him which Hidan dodged and avoided and retrieved his weapon. "I swear I will break you and present your damn head to everyone," he snarled, pure madness in his eyes. Jashin style he started when Orochimaru countered by using a water jutsu he learned from the stolen scroll months ago and sent a gigantic wave at him. It engulfed him and Orochimaru followed it up by freezing the water and trapping him. A fitting end, Orochimaru said as he looked on at the trapped and frozen Hidan. He turned and started to walk away when he heard a cracking noise. He turned and his eyes widened when the ice cracked and shattered as Hidan broke free of it. As easily as one would tear apart paper. I cannot be stopped so easily. Hidan shouted and charged him. Orochimaru summoned Kusanagi and blocked his attack. If you will not bow to Jashin-sama, I will break you and your miserable son. Hidan snarled at him. I will bow nor break before no man, the least of which you. Orochimaru responded and kicked him in the chest. Hidan swung his scythe and he dodged the attack. He performed hand symbols and hit him with a gust of wind, but Hidan ignored it and cast a jutsu and summoned several armed skeletal minions which attacked Orochimaru as he recovered. Orochimaru dodged the skeleton's attacks and punched one's head off its skull, shattering upon hitting the ground. There were many of them and were an annoyance as he fought them. Enough of this. Fire release, fire python. He shouted and he summoned a giant snake made of flame at them which incinerated them and turned them into dust, destroying them all. What next, Hidan? He taunted the white-haired man. I've held my own against your jutsus and your pathetic minions. Even stopped you from changing the past. What else can you do? Hidan glared at him as the advantage was his. Kakashi dodged Lu Xiao's halberd as he skillfully dodged and evaded his attacks. You should enjoy this more. Lu Xiao said to him, smiling as he swung at him. I don't take such enjoyment in mindless fights. Kakashi responded, leaping over him. He prepared a jutsu and fired it at him, which he blocked. He then rushed him and leapt up and delivered a powerful kick which would have snapped an ordinary man's neck. An ordinary man, that is. Lu Xiao grabbed him by the foot and tossed him into the air and threw his halberd at him. Kakashi dodged it in the nick of time and Lu Xiao leapt up after him. I've told you, none can defeat me in battle. Lu Xiaonong shouted and swung his fists at him. Kakashi evaded them. I don't care what matter there is for involvement in a fight, I just do so. He shouted and raised his fists up and slammed them down onto Kakashi's head. Kakashi fell and hit the ground on his back. Lu Xiao fell downwards as well with his halberd in hand, prepared to skewer him. Die! He shouted as he prepared to kill him. Kakashi narrowly rolled out of the way in time and the copy nin leapt up and slammed his fist into Lu Xiao's face, who only smiled at the blow. Kakashi evaded a swing and prepared a jutsu. Fire style, Phoenix Stream. He shouted, firing multiple fireballs at him. Lu Xiao swung his weapon and it by itself was able to create a gust of wind that blew them away, but revealed hidden shuriken with paper bombs attached to them that exploded upon reaching him. Lu Xiao was knocked a few feet back and except for some dirt and dust on him appeared unharmed. Is that all you can muster? Lu Xiao taunted him. Kakashi frowned beneath his mask and prepared a jutsu. Earth style, compressed wall. He shouted and two pillars of earth appeared on each side of him and closed in on him, trapping him and beginning to squeeze him in between him. Lu Xiao gripped each side and let out a roar and broke them apart. He charged Kakashi and cut him in two, only for him to become a puddle of water. Mizu Bushin, Kakashi appearing behind him, explained and stabbed him in the back with a kunai, his armor preventing it from doing serious damage. Lu Xiao hit him with the back end of his halberd in retaliation and knocked him back. This guy's tough, Kakashi muttered to himself. I have yet to land a serious blow on him. This is more like it. Lu Xiao shouted and fired a jutsu at him, which he dodged. Kakashi leapt at him, but he let out a lion-like roar which knocked him backwards. Battle is meant to be enjoyed. Kakashi. A voice shouted and he turned and saw Asuma re-entering the fray. He leapt and attacked with his trench knives, which Lu Xiao blocked. The Jonin leapt over and did a somersault and landed beside the copy nin. Let's see how you handle two-leaf Jonin. Asuma said, getting into a fighting stance. Whether it's 2 or 200, I'll kill you all. Lu Xiao shouted as a red aura formed around him as he gathered chakra and slammed his halberd into the ground and sent a tremor at them. The two leapt out of the way and charged him, fighting him at the same time. Their attacks and movements were coordinated perfectly, yet Lu Xiao was able to block and counter their attacks as he kept them from hitting him. Die! He shouted and fired a red beam from his halberd and they dodged it in the nick of time. Asuma prepared a jutsu when Lu Xiao charged him and kicked him in the side, knocking him back. He was dazed and disoriented and opened to attack when a sound kunoichi appeared and blocked the attack using crystals. You should not be so careless. Gurren said to Asuma. Crystal release. Crystal lance. She shouted and using her Kekai Genkai created a lance made of crystal and charged him. Be skewered, she shouted and went to stab him. Lu Xiang dodged it and slashed at her with his halberd, which shattered her lance upon contact, surprising her. Crystal blade, she shouted, and 2 blades appeared on both arms and she swiped and slashed at him. You think your jewelry can stop me? Lu Xiang said, dodging her attacks. He dodged a swipe and punched her in the stomach and hit her again and sent her flying backwards, and she was caught by Kakashi. Put me down, I'll kill Ag. She coughed up blood from the force of his punches. Easy, we fight him together, Kakashi said to her, setting her on her feet. It's too tough to fight one-on-one, he said to her. He's not holding back. Naruto and Haku managed to drive him back before, but that was because he underestimated them. He's fighting with all his power. It's been a long time since I fought someone this strong. Are you done talking? Lu Xiang said to the 3. If so, it's time I. Wind blade, a voice shouted, and Lu Xiang narrowly avoided an attack that would have killed him. He turned his head and saw Baki, and with him was Kimimaro Kagaya and Iruka Yumino. HMPH, so more vermin has shown up, Lu Xiang said as the new arrivals. No matter, vermin is still vermin, he said as he prepared to fight them all. Elsewhere, unknown to any of the combatants, a force numbering 5,000 was making its way to the field. They carried the flags and banners with the symbol of Iwagakure and Jashin. They were a secret force that had been sent by Kage to take a different path that was longer and would arrive at the battlefield later, and be an unexpected force that would put the battlefield in their favor. The force marched heading to battle when they stopped when they saw a figure standing in the middle of the road by himself. The strange man had his eyes closed and wore a black cloak with red clouds on it and had piercings on his face. I'm tired of this is as far as you go, he said to them, not opening his eyes. The force gripped their weapons and the commander ordered him to step aside. I have no use for you in the world that I shall rule as a god, he said as anger appeared in his voice. The commander ordered him to move again, but he did not, as he stood there by himself, one man against thousands. The Jashinist, seeing that he wasn't going to move, ordered an attack, and the force charged him, intent on cutting him down. Pathetic fools, he said, and slowly, as his eyes opened, revealing the Rinnegan. Lightning cracked through the air as the 2 swordsmen fought one another. You do not deserve to wield that blade, Raiga Kurosuke shouted, slashing at Haku with his twin blades. Neither do you, Haku responded, blocking his attacks with Zabuza's Zanbato. Zabuza was a weakling who refused to throw his heart into his duty. And you're any better, Haku said, and Raiga spat at him. Lightning ball, he shouted, firing the attack at him, which Haku blocked with his ice. He channeled lightning through his swords and sent a bolt at him, which Haku, using an ice mirror, teleported out of the way. He re-emerged from another mirror and threw Senbon at him, which Raiga dodged thanks to Rinmara detecting it with his eyes. Raiga channeled his lightning and blasted it at him, and Haku summoned a wall of ice which stopped it. You are the one who does not deserve to wield those blades, Haku shouted at him. You took pleasure in the killings of innocent people for no reason. The 7 swordsmen were not meant to be butcheries. Shut up, Raiga shouted and slashed at him, and Haku blocked it. We are demons. That's what the Mist Nins are created for. To kill and kill and kill, even if it means we give up our humanity in exchange. Haku dodged his attacks and avoided his lightning. Zabuza had taught him all about Raiga Kurosuke and his tactics and methods of attack. Is your servant a demon as well? He said as he slashed at him, and Raiga dodged it. Leave Rinmara out of this, Raiga snarled, firing more lightning at him. Haku evaded it and summoned his ice mirrors, and surrounding him on all sides fired multiple Senbon and ice kunai at him. Raiga surrounded himself with lightning to block them. Haku, moving as a blur, threw dozens of them at him all at once, aiming for his throat. Raiga roared and sent lightning in all directions, shattering the mirror and forcing Haku to drop them. Haku swung his blade at him and Raiga blocked it as the 2 glared at one another. Why are you so full of rage? It's none of your business, Raiga snarled. You think I want this? To have been stuck as a killer by a fool of a Kage who was only concerned with how much blood I spilled every day, while those other bastards such as Kisame Hoshigaki took enjoyment. Living an empty shell of a life with no meaning. So killing all in your path is your way of finding meaning? Haku asked, disgusted. I said shut up, Raiga shouted and fired lightning at him as it cracked overhead. Haku avoided it as Raiga slashed at him with his twin swords. Ice release, ice bullets, Haku said and fired the jutsu at him, which he blocked. Frozen spikes, he He shouted using his Kekai Genkai and covered the area in spikes made of ice. Raiga leapt up to avoid being impaled by them and fired an bolt of lightning at Haku, who dodged the attack. He then turned the spikes into water and melted them. Raiga landed in the wet grassland and growled, knowing that any lightning attacks would kill him and Rinmara if he tried them while wet. He charged Haku and slashed at him, and Haku blocked them. "You may be strong, but I will not be stopped in my pursuit." He snarled and attacked him, and Haku dodged and evaded them. Raiga was good as Zabuza had told him, and Haku, thanks to the enchanted bracelets Naruto had given him, was able to time and block his attacks perfectly with the enhanced speed on his arms so he could stop his attacks. Water style. Water dragon jutsu. Haku shouted, forming hand seals, and fired a dragon made of water at him, which hit him and knocked him backwards. Raiga growled and got up and charged him and began channeling lightning through his swords and threw them at him at the last second before it would affect him. Haku's eyes widened as the spinning blades spun at him and 2 bolts hit him and knocked him back. "Time to die." Raiga shouted and performed hand symbols, preparing a powerful attack. Lightning release. Bolt of Kaminari. He shouted, and a woman appeared seemingly made out of electricity and fired a powerful bolt of lightning at Haku. The bolt engulfed him and consumed him, and Raiga grinned, thinking he had won as it shot off into the distance and destroyed a tree. To his surprise, Haku appeared before him using a clone at the last second and slashed him across the ribs, causing him to cry out in pain, as that would have sliced him in two if it had been any deeper. "Raiga-sama." Rinmara cried out in fear. "I'm all right." Raiga responded, and he retrieved his swords. Lightning burial. Banquet of lightning. He shouted and thrust them into the ground and sent bolts at Haku, who dodged them and created a barrier made of ice to stop it. Ice release. Frozen earth. Haku shouted and grasped the ground, and the surrounding area became covered in ice, and Raiga became trapped, unable to move as his feet were covered in ice. Haku charged him and prepared another jutsu. Water style. Vortex. He shouted, and the two became trapped in a vortex of water which spun in the air. Haku looked on and saw Raiga remain strong as he was used to such conditions. His companion though wasn't, and he saw that he was losing air. Knowing he wasn't in any part of this, he stopped the jutsu and the two fell to the ground. "Enough, this is over," Haku said, looking at Raiga and the weakened Rinmara. "Go find a home, live the rest of your days in peace and make amends for what you did, Raiga Kurosuke. Your companion does not deserve to live the same experience you have," he said to him. "No," Raiga said and stood up. "There's no point left for me. I've done things I'll never forgive myself for," he said, remembering his past and how he met Rinmara. "Eventually, even if it's 30 years, someone will track me down and kill me for revenge. The only thing I know is how to fight," he said, and unhooked Rinmara from his back. "But that doesn't mean you should share the same fight," he said. "What are you doing?" Rinmara asked. "I can help you. You did enough for me," he said, holding him in his arms. "You, woman," he shouted at Kurenai Yuhi, who was nearby tending to a wounded ninja. His words caught her by surprise, and he walked towards her and unexpectedly thrust Rinmara into her arms, the boy protesting, not wanting to leave. "Take care of this kid, give him a better life in Konoha than I could give him. Be free, Rinmara." "Raiga." Rinmara shouted, trying to get free, but his weak body could not do so. Kurenai didn't say anything but nodded, understanding what he wanted her to do. "Let's finish this," Raiga said, holding the twin swords in his arms, and then charged Haku. The feminine boy nodded, knowing that this is what he wanted, and the two charged each other and attacked each other. The two dashed past each other and they both stopped, and time stood still. A pair of blades dropped to the ground, their master losing his grip on them. "How glorious! A fitting end," Raiga shouted, a smile on his face as blood seeped from his fatal wounds. "An end worthy of a true seven swordsman of Kurigakure. Haku of Odogakure, wielder of the Zanbato passed down by Zabuza Momochi, I thank you for this. Farewell," he shouted, and in his last ounce of strength summoned a bolt of lightning which hit him, ending his life. "May you find peace and solace in the next life and any other you live, farewell," Haku said, and turned and bowed and sheathed his weapon. The fight raged on between the forces, and with the turn of snow, the coalition was starting to win the fight against the Jushinists, as the outcome of the battle was turning in their favor. Kage, however, showed no emotion on his face except when a bolt of lightning destroyed a tree and he felt a throb of pain go into his head. As he felt something call out to him. "What is this?" he said as he felt it. "It can't be," he said, and disappeared in a swirl of flames. He arrived near the destroyed tree and he paid no attention to the fact that he was in the middle of a fight. He scanned the entire area and looked around and his eyes widened when he saw sticking out of the tree the claw of a dragon. "There it is!" he exclaimed and forced his way to it, killing all that got into his way, even his own followers, as he made his way to it. He reached towards the claw and tugged at it and yanked it out, pulling bark out as he removed it from the tree. "All these months and I finally have it," he said as he looked down at the claw he held. "The fourth claw. The tool I need to finish and create Jashin's ultimate jutsu that will conquer the world," he shouted as he held the claw upwards, feeling its power surge within him. At long last he had all four of them. All the months, all the searching for, the destruction of everything that got in his path towards finding them, now he finally had them all and could annihilate all who opposed him and his master. He let out a laugh filled with madness as he held it upwards. "I have no more use of any of you. Soon Jashin will rule the entire world," he exclaimed and disappeared, teleporting away from the battlefield, leaving his men behind as he had found what he needed. Orochimaru and Hidan continued their bitter fight as they fought one another. Orochimaru dodged a thrown javelin and fired several snakes at him, which Hidan evaded. Hidan prepared a jutsu but was stopped when Orochimaru threw Kusanagi at him, causing him to move out of the way and interrupted it. "Die!" Hidan shouted and performed a jutsu and fired several exploding skulls at him. Orochimaru dodged them and cast his own jutsu, which Hidan blocked. Orochimaru wiped the sweat off of his brow. It had been a long time since he had been in a long fight, not since his battle with Sarutobi and Hidan. Although nowhere near the Sandame's strength, wasn't an S-class nin for no reason, and even Orochimaru was wondering what he had to do to defeat a man who was seemingly immortal and didn't quit. "That's it. You bastard stood in my way for the last time," Hidan snarled at him. "I'll end this once and for all," he said and prepared a jutsu. "You may have stopped me from changing the past, but do you really think Naruto loves you? After all you've done," he said, and his words confused Orochimaru. "Monsters don't deserve to have love," he shouted and slashed at Orochimaru, who found himself unable to move. The scenery changed all of a sudden and Orochimaru found himself back at Otogakure in his home. What is going on here? Another time jutsu," he muttered to himself, not understanding what was happening. He looked around and a smile grew on his face when he saw his son. "Naruto," he called out to him and walked towards him. To his surprise, the boy backed away, hatred in his eyes. "What's wrong? What are you running, my son?" he asked him. "Monster," Naruto spat at him and Orochimaru's eyes widened at what his son just said. "You're nothing but a monster," he shouted at him. "What are you talking about? Don't lie to me, Orochimaru. Look at all you've done. You murdered the Sandame, kidnapped me, and used thousands of people as experiments to satisfy your own goals," Naruto said, and his words stung him more than any sword or jutsu could. "I hate you. I can't stand the fact that I'm your son. That a monster's blood runs through me. You don't love me, you never have, you only loved yourself. You only wanted me so I could be a weapon for you. That's not true. You did the same thing to Anko-chan," Naruto shouted at him, hatred in his eyes. "You used her and tossed her aside once she had no further use for you, the same way you have done me." "No, you're wrong," Orochimaru said as he remembered all the things he had done. He had done terrible things, even to his own students and babies, with no remorse. "I can't stand to even look at you. I'd rather be an homeless orphan than be your child. A monster who cares for no one. I never have loved you. I hate you." "No," Orochimaru shouted, and he fell to his knees as he felt despair overwhelm him as he was facing his greatest fear, being told by Naruto that he didn't love him and hated him. The boy looked at him, disgust in his eyes as Orochimaru remembered all he had done. Turning his back on his teammates and his sensei who was a father to him, betraying his ideals that he once had, taking pleasure in watching his experiments suffer, watching in joy as he killed a person in front of their loved ones. He remembered it all the things he had done that no one could ever forgive. He couldn't even forgive himself for all the things he had done. But then, a different memory appeared in his mind. It was at the orphanage and he was holding in his arms and hugging a 1-year-old baby Naruto. He felt something at that and he remembered all the other things as well. He saw looking on in secret as the boy scarfed down ramen. Witnessing him become a shinobi for the first time and passing the genin test. The joy of seeing and talking to him for the first time back at Wave. Seeing how they were reunited for the first time and how the boy hugged him and he felt happiness for the first time in his heart in many years. Seeing him being accepted by the other villagers of Oto and watching him train and compete in the exams and the reunion they had when Naruto was healed from his wound. He remembered them and others as he last saw the two standing side by side, Naruto looking up at his father happily with love in his eyes. "You're wrong," he said, and his eyes glazed in determination as he stood up. "You are wrong," he shouted at the boy. "I know the truth," he said, confronting him with reality, which was the key to breaking the jutsu Hidan had put him in. "My son loves me, and that means you're not my son," he shouted, and the doppelganger disappeared and Orochimaru found himself back at Sekigahara. Orochimaru ducked his head under and avoided Hidan's scythe at the last second. He then, gripping Kusanagi in speed that rivaled the yellow flash of Konoha, sliced of Hidan's hands, causing to scream out in pain as he cut them off, still gripping the scythe. He kicked Hidan in the chest and knocked him to the ground. "Damn it," Hidan cursed. "You should be broken and dead," he exclaimed, not understanding how Orochimaru had survived his attempts. Orochimaru glared with utter contempt at the man. "It is over." "It's not over yet. I will tear your miserable face off and chew out your heart with my own teeth if I have to," Hidan shouted at him. "Kuchio's number jutsu, Rashomon," Orochimaru said, and summoned the large gate. "You and your kind have plagued me and my son for too long," he said, and pulled Hidan up. "You can't kill me, I'm immortal," Hidan snarled at him. Orochimaru didn't say anything but reached over and pulled at the gate. It moved and opened, revealing a black void, surprising Hidan. "You know why they call Rashomon a gate?" "'Cause I discovered that it was a portal into the abyss itself. A gateway to hell. I'll send you to your Jashin, so you can worship at that bastard's side for eternity," he shouted, and threw Hidan into it. "Arrgghhhh. Hidan shouted as he fell into the void. He screamed and cursed at Orochimaru as he fell. "I'll be back. You hear me? Even if it takes 100 years. This won't hold me forever. You'll see. I'll come back one day and kill you. I'll kill you and your son both. I will see to it that you both." Slam. Orochimaru slammed the gate shut, trapping him in it forever, never again to threaten him or his son ever again. Naruto and Muta's fight still went at it as the two continued to fight, battling with the same amount on intensity and hatred that Orochimaru and Hidan had. Naruto blocked a swing and raised his foot up to kick him in the face. Muta dodged and pressed his fingers to his throat and let loose with his green mist. This time Naruto, having been on the receiving end of it before, was ready for it and covered his face, blocking it. Naruto performed hand seals and cast a jutsu which Muta avoided. Naruto dodged a swing at his head and was backed up by him. Muta then threw a kunai laced with paper bombs at him and it blew up and sent dust into the air, disorienting Naruto. "Die!" he shouted and charged him and stabbed him in the heart. Or so he thought, when to his surprise the Nodashi bounced off of his chest as if it had hit a force field. "What?" he exclaimed, not understanding, and stabbed him again only for it to do no damage. "What treachery is this?" Naruto, not understanding, then remembered the antidote Tsunade had made him drink before the fight had begun. That antidote, it must counter and block any attacks made by enchanted weapons like his. "That means I can't be hurt by his attacks or the blade's poison," he said to himself, understanding what was going on. "I'll kill you even without using this," Muta shouted, but Naruto charged and attacked him, driving him back. He sent away Kusanagi and summoned his Kusarigama. He twirled the metal ball overhead and threw it at him, which he dodged. Again he spun it and threw, which Muta slashed at, and the two weapons got entangled. Naruto charged him and went to stab him with the side when Muta let go of Satsugasha and leapt away. He formed hand symbols and cast a jutsu at Naruto, firing multiple shuriken. Naruto blocked it by putting in a sound barrier around him. Howling Wolf no Jutsu. Naruto let loose a powerful howl at Muta, who stood his ground. Naruto then did more hand symbols and prepare another jutsu. He fired it and Muta was hit and knocked back but got up. "Enough," Muta shouted and prepared hand symbols. A series of chains shot out of the sleeves of his clothes and wrapped around Naruto, who was trapped as the chains had sharp edges on it and teared into his skin. "I'll rip you in two," he exclaimed as Naruto struggled to get free of them. Suddenly the chains were shattered by a giant club and the chains lightened around him and fell off. Naruto looked and saw that Adoki had smashed it. "To Yuya," He shouted and looked over and saw the redhead standing there using her flute to command her summon to attack. You dare interfere. Muda snarled at her. Shut the hell up, asshole. Tayuya shouted and played a tune on her flute summoning her other doki. They attacked Muda swinging their giant kanabos at him. Muda dodged and ducked their attacks as they were relentless and gave Naruto precious time to recover. The doki swung their clubs at him and Muda tried to fight them back but they overwhelmed him. He retrieved his nodashi but still had to remain moving. Go to hell you bastard. Tayuya shouted doing a jutsu. Fire release. Multiple fireballs. She shouted and fired them at him. Muda was hit by one of them and stunned but recovered. Sound bullet. She fired the attack at him which he dodged. Enough of this. Muda shouted and he charged chakra into his sword. He then delivered a powerful slash and sent a wave of energy at the doki which hit and incapacitated them. He then charged Tayuya and with speed too fast for her to follow appeared before her. He delivered an overhead chop aiming to slice her in half. Tayuya at the last second brought her flute up and blocked it but she struggled as he overpowered her. Cracks showed up on her flute and he sliced right through it breaking it in half and with that the doki disappeared. Tayuya. Naruto shouted his eyes turning red as he struck her across the face and then delivered a hard punch and knocked her down. I'll kill you. Naruto vowed and charged Muda and swung his kusarigama at him. Muda dodged it and struck at the chain cutting it off. Naruto slashed at him with the side but missed him. The two slashed and stabbed at each other as Naruto was going on pure fury as he attacked him over what he did. The two fought as pure loathing and hatred was each other's eyes. Naruto slashed at his throat but missed as they attacked. Naruto aimed to take his head off with one powerful blow using a large amount of chakra when Muda disappeared and reappeared in place of a log. Grinning he placed his fingers on his throat and spat out mist again, but this time it was a different color, a pale yellow color which hit Naruto. The boy suddenly found himself unable to move a muscle as if he found himself being drained as he was being paralyzed by it. Can't move, he said as he struggled but couldn't move. Muda grinned evilly and prepared an attack. It appears you will not kill me this day. He shouted and sending all of his chakra into his sword let loose with a powerful wave of flame from his sword. Channeling every last bit of energy and chakra at him. Aw shit. Naruto thought as he couldn't move out of the way of this one. The attack engulfed him and he cried out in pain as it burned his clothes and skin. Naruto's burned body hit the ground hard with a thud and he let out a cough and spat out blood. And Naruto. Tayuya said on her stomach looking on in dismay as Muda walked over to him utter contempt in his eyes. Is this it? This is the power you have? He said and then raised his foot up and stomped it on Naruto's chest repeatedly. You may have gotten stronger but you don't have the power to change the world. It's me. I'll be the one who changes the world. Kage, the Akatsuki leader, they are all fools. Without Kyuubi you're nothing but an insect. He shouted and kicked him in the head several times. Naruto cried out in pain as he was unable to move. What's wrong? Muda said mocking him stepping on his throat cutting off his air. Aren't you going to show me your true power? He said and kicked him again and knocked him over to the side. I'll end your miserable life once and for all. He said and prepared to kill him. He was suddenly stopped when a hand grabbed his foot. He looked down and saw Tayuya grasping his foot preventing him from moving. Change the world. What the hell are you talking about? She said to him. Stupid girl let go. He shouted prepared to stab her in the back. Naruto. Do it now. Tayuya shouted. Muda raised his head up and his eyes widened in horror as he saw Naruto standing up charging a gigantic ball of energy. His eyes glazed in determination. Naruto charged it as the ball grew bigger and bigger until it was bigger than he was. Rasengan. Naruto shouted and threw it at him which at that close range he was unable to dodge it. No. Muda shouted as it consumed him and it went flying off in the distance. Naruto looked on as slowly his wounds healed. Seeing Tayuya he went over and helped her up, having her lean on him to support. It's finally over, he said looking on as his rivalry with Muda had finally come to an end. Tayuya, thank you, he said to the redhead who smiled at him. You owe me a new flute you know that. She said holding up the remains of her broken flute. When we get home, I might kick your ass for having to save you. Or kiss you, whatever comes first. She said and he smiled at her as they looked on as the battle was reaching its end. Come on let's go. He said and they began walking towards the main camp. Lu Xiang swung his halberd at Kimimaro Kage, who was hit but due to his skeletal structure suffered little damage from it. Haruka came at him from the side and threw multiple paper bombs at him which exploded and damaged him, but he still wasn't knocked down. Just how strong is this guy? Kakashi said to himself as even with all of the group fighting him, he still was holding his own against them. Out of my way, vermin. Sky Piercer. He shouted and threw his halberd and it let out red beams of energy. The group of ninja dodged it at the last second. Asuma charged him and struck him across the face, but he ignored the blows and kicked him away. Gurren threw shurikens made of crystal at him which he deflected with his weapon, and he slammed it into the ground and shook the earth, sending tremors at them with it alone. He slammed his head into Baki's face and knocked him away. Suddenly he was stabbed in the back and he turned and saw that Kabuto had appeared behind him and had stabbed him with an enhanced scalpel that was tipped with poison. He swung at him and Kabuto dodged the attack in the nick of time, and Anko appeared as well and stabbed him across the chest, penetrating his armor with a kunai. Kimimaro took that happening and using one of his dances stabbed him multiple times with his bone swords. But still he did not go down. Come on, just die already. Anko shouted at him in disbelief that he was still standing after that. Lu Xiang gripped his halberd and grasped it so tight his knuckles lost all blood in them. I have been forced to fight since the moment I could walk. I have pit myself against bandits, mercenaries, samurai, ninja, and others all of my life as I beat them all. Yet none of all the fights I have been in have I been more excited or closer to death than this. He shouted and roared and slammed his halberd into the ground, splitting the ground. He charged them still full of strength, ignoring any wounds and hits he had. He came on as he fought against them all, still refusing to go down. Kakashi dodged his attacks as he could tell that despite it, he was weakened. He was still dangerous though, but Kakashi could tell that the attacks and poison were starting to take its toll on him. He just needed the right moment to finish this. Lu Xiang swung his halberd and missed Haruka and Asuma, who dodged his attacks. With all his strength he swung his weapon, intent on cutting them all down with one blow. Suddenly he was stopped as sand formed around him and trapped him. He looked back and saw Gaara, the Kage, using his sand to immobilize him. Struggle all he might, in his weakened state he could not break free of Gaara's attack. It's time, Kakashi said and lowered his mask, revealing his Sharingan eye. Spreading his legs out he then began his strongest attack. Lighting and electricity cracked around him as he charged it. After several long moments it was fully charged and he dashed towards the trapped Lu Xiang. Reikiri. Kakashi shouted and thrusted the attack with all his power right at him, hitting him directly in the chest, penetrating his armor and going through his heart. Lu Xiang screamed in fury as Kakashi's hand went right through his chest and emerged throughout the other side. Removing his hand he withdrew it and Gaara removed his sand. He turned and walked away, the only sound of Lu Xiang's dying gasps. He looked back and saw him still standing. I am impossible, the warrior said as he fell to one knee, a large hole in his chest. How? Why, how could I lose to the likes of you? Lu Xiang said and lifted his head up and looked at the group that had defeated him, not understanding why his life was ending instead of theirs. Because you try and go it alone. Kakashi responded to him, telling him before he died. You are strong, but you had a fatal flaw. You trusted no one. Baki said to him. We fight alongside each other as equals. Gurren said as well, the sound Nin standing beside Anko. And in turn that makes us all stronger. Asuma spoke up as well with him, Haruka and Kabuto. The red-headed Kage stepped forward. There is no shame in needing another person's help sometimes. Gaara said and Kimimaro beside him silently nodded in agreement. Not everything can be done by yourself, we all need another's help whether we admit it or not. Anko said as well. That's right, Kakashi said and looked back at the group smiling underneath his mask. He turned his head to look at Lu Xiang. A man named Minato Namikaze once told me, your teammates and allies are your weapons, your shield, your protection. If you trust them with your life they will save you. Lu Xiang gripped his halberd and stood up. HMPH, your speeches, they are nauseating. He said and dropped his weapon and fell on his back as all life left him. Kakashi walked towards him and bent low and reached down and closed his eyes. He then turned and looked back at them. Ninjas from Konoha, Suna, and Oto. 3 different countries, each having put aside his or her own personal feelings and grudges and had been victorious. It's over, he said as a majority of the Jashinists and Earth Nins had fled. They had won. Meanwhile, a lone figure walked towards the pair of swords sticking into the ground where Haku and Raiga had fought. With Raiga now dead, the twin blades were now masterless. The Kiba blades of the seven swordsmen. Sasuke Uchiha said as he stared at them. He had seen Raiga use them. If wielded by the right person, they would make that person dangerous and powerful. He reached towards them and a bolt of lightning went between their hilts almost as if the blades were sentient. He frowned and looked at them. I do not fear the thunder, nor the lightning. He proclaimed and grasped them and pulled them out of the dirt and lifted them up, holding them overhead. I will use these blades. He said and took them. And they will help me fulfill my purpose. He said as he took the Kiba blades with him, the new owner and master of them. The battle is won, Tsunade announced shortly afterwards. The victorious coalition each let out a cry of victory over their success at Sekigahara, defeating the Jushinists and nearly winning the war. The Hokage smiled as she looked on at the celebrating shinobi and looked out in the distance and saw faintly the banners of the Snow Army. At the front was Mitsunari Chono with him Shima-zun leading his men back home, having not said a word to any of them and withdrawing from the war for good. A smile appeared on her face as she looked on at them all, overcoming the odds and winning the day. She noticed Kurenai carried the child known as Rinmara, holding him and comforting him. No doubt she'd have to examine him. She glanced around seeing the celebrating shinobi of the three villages. Losses had been taken and each one would never be forgotten. The Jashin army had been nearly wiped out and many Earth Nins had surrendered as well to them. So what's our next move? Jiraiya asked her, handing her a bottle of sake. She took it and smiled. For now we rest and relax and heal our wounds. Our victory today all but guarantees the end of the Fourth War. It's not over yet, the Tsuchikage still lives. Orochimaru said, standing beside them. Kage had not been found as he had disappeared from the field. Tsunade nodded and took a drink as the three Sannin stood next to each other. Naruto and Haku embraced in the center of the cheering victorious army. The two sworn brothers having survived and won their battles. Naruto looked around at the cheering coalition as they celebrated their victory. Even the stoic ones such as Ibiki was celebrating their victory at Sekigahara. He looked and saw Sakura, Anko, Ruruka, Gaara, Dosu, Shikamaru, Kabuto and others and he smiled. Leaf, sound, and sand. They had overcome the odds and had won a great victory this day. He looked out in the distance and saw Sasuke seated by himself looking over the twin set of blades he had. Naruto paid him no attention though. His smile grew when he saw Tayuya walk towards him and the sound Kunoichi hugged him and he hugged her back. It was almost over. Far away, having been launched from the battlefield, Muta Daidoji laid on the ground, his body battered and broken, unable to move. Satsugaisha laid next to him as he laid there, not moving as he could only look up at the sky. Why is it that he has such power? He asked himself bitterly. What's so special about him? Without the Kyuubi he's nothing. He said, unable to comprehend how it was Naruto had defeated him. Footsteps approached and he forcefully turned his head and saw a figure stand before him looking down upon him. The figure wore a black coat with red clouds on it and had piercings on his face. He stared down upon him with nothing in his eyes. Pain, so you're here to mock me as well. Finish me off for betraying your cause back at the exams. Muta said, looking up at the Akatsuki leader who looked down upon him. Tell me, you know the truth, there is nothing about Naruto that makes him capable of changing the world. What is it that you were planning, Muta? Pain asked him. What would you have done if by some chance you had managed to kill Naruto? Would you have turned your blade against the Jushinists? Against the other countries of the land? Against Akatsuki and myself? Muta looked up at him and slowly he let out a laugh. I never really thought of that, to be honest. Looking back, I never looked past what I would have done after I killed him. He said and coughed up blood. The world I seek to create has no place for zealots such as Hidan and the Jushinists. Nor for fundamentalists who don't look past what they do. Pain said to him, I don't care what I do after I kill him. Muta said, his voice full of fury and between gasps of breath. Anything that happens afterward is irrelevant to me, I have proven my own existence this day. That I can change the world just as well. He said and reached towards his Nodashi and grasped it and lifted it up. My name is Muta Daidoji, I will be the one. His strength left him and his hand hit the ground, dropping the blade as his eyes rolled up into the back of his head as he lost conscious. The Akatsuki leader stared down at him as a blue-haired woman appeared next to him. What is to be done? The war reaches its end. We head back to Omegakure. Our plan is going into effect. I know for certain that the nine-tailed vessel won't die. Yes, your plan. It will take some time for it to be fully complete, won't it? Indeed, 3 years it will take, but it will be worth it in the end. Let's go. What of this? Retrieve the sword, and the body. Chapter 85. The doors to the chamber were thrown open and the man stomped through the room as he made his way to the center of the room. At long last, I finally have it, he exclaimed, holding the dragon claw in hand. After all these months, delays and setbacks, forced to halt my plans, I finally have the tool I need to conquer and destroy all that stands in Jashin's path. Kage Sosano said as he stood in the center of the room. He placed the claw down in the room next to the 3 other claws that had been found. He had fled Sekigahara after obtaining the claw, showing no care or empathy over the loss of many of his men. Even Hidan, the man who had killed his village and took him when he was a child and taught him the ways of Jashin, was gone, but it did not matter. He would willingly sacrifice 1,000,000 lives and do so again and again in order to ensure that his plan would work. He looked at them and watched as the 4 claws floated right side up and began levitating across the room. Yes, yes, do it. Unleash your power, become one. Kage shouted as they circled around the room. He looked on as they began circling faster and faster, and after several long moments they came together and pressed against one another. A bright flash engulfed the room and Kage covered his eyes at the risk of being blinded from it. As soon as it began, the flash stopped. He uncovered his eyes and cackled at what he saw before him. In the middle of the room, reaching towards the ceiling, was now a gigantic crystal. Yes, finally Jashin, the technique that you prepared to use has finally become complete, he said as he walked towards it. If hadn't been for that accursed sage, you would have finished this. But still something is missing. Kage-sama, a voice said, and he turned his head and saw Dajao enter the room. Why did you abandon your entire army back at Sekigahara? The army has been nearly wiped out. Even Hidan is gone. The rest of us had to flee for our lives, she said, but noticed he didn't say anything or pay any attention. How can we defeat them now that, she stopped and looked on, now noticing the crystal. What is this? This Dajao is what will give Jashin his ultimate victory, Kage said to her as she cautiously walked towards him. This was meant to be his ultimate creation in jutsu, which will enslave not just the elemental nations, but the entire world as well, he said as she stood beside him. Now that I have completed it, only one thing remains until absolute victory. I see, Dajao said to him and allowed a smile to form. With this we shall rule at the side of Jashin forever, she said, and he turned and gently stroked her hair. Of course, but sacrifices are essential in his teachings, he said and smiled at her. Next thing she knew, there was a sharp pain in her chest. She looked down and saw to her horror a knife sticking in it. She looked up at him, terror in her eyes as there was nothing in his as he stabbed her in the heart. Why? She said faintly as life left her. He pulled the knife out and brought his rings up. As Jashin did with his own son, I will sacrifice you so that I can create the ultimate jutsu, he said, and she watched in horror as her blood-soaked heart floated out of her chest. She fell to the floor dead, her face stuck in permanent terror. Showing no remorse at what he just did and paying her no further mind, he walked towards the crystal and pressed the heart against it. The crystal absorbed it and began glowing, its light illuminating the room. He let out a maniacal laugh as the room glowed. Now there is only one thing left, he said as he basked in the glow of the crystal. At Konoha the next day, all that remains is to march to Iwagakure and defeat Kage Sosano, the Tsuchikage, Tsunade said, seated at her seat at the council, which was filled with many people, some who weren't on the council. With his army beaten and many of his top men defeated, he is all that is left that pose a major threat of the Jashinists. However, as we've seen, the Jashinists will not surrender and fight to the death. The same will probably be of him. Until he is dead, this war continues. With his defeat, the head of this many-fanged cobra will fall at last and peace will reign, she said to them all. What do you propose is done, Lady Hokage? Danzo asked, the old man having been quiet since the beginning of the war and had not involved himself in any affairs since his incident with Orochimaru months back. We march to the village and claim his head. I've sent word to Sand and Sound as well. All forces, Konoha, Suna, and Odo shall march within 2 days. Then we attack him at his own base and end this war once and for all," she said, and many voices went up in agreement and cheering. She mentioned for silence. "Everyone be prepared, I want everything done and set up before the sun raises the day after tomorrow," she announced, and the group cheered again. Later that hour Tsunade stood inside her office and standing before her was Kakashi and several others. "Kakashi, Anko, Shikamaru, you have proven yourselves worthy of the accolades given to you in the past and those that you shall receive in the future after your efforts at Sekigahara," she said to them, personally praising them, and smiled. "Perhaps, one of you will take my place as Hokage one day. Konoha and I shall continue to count on your skills to ensure its safety and put an end to the Fourth Ninja War." "We are honored," the group said and bowed their heads in response. "Elsewhere. This is what you wanted to show me," Orochimaru said, looking on as they stood in the training grounds. With him was Naruto, and he looked on as a small group of samurai and sound shinobi were getting saddled up and positioning the beasts they rode upon. Rhinos that had been captured from the battle and domesticated and trained the past couple of days. A new type of cavalry, Otusan, the Jashinists used it, so why not us as well? Naruto said to him. "Here, allow me to demonstrate," he said, and produced a tomato and mentioned for Zaku and Kin, who were on a two-seated saddle, to charge. Zaku gave the command and his rhino began running and charging towards them, the ground shaking as it got closer. Naruto tossed the tomato into the air and Kin threw a shuriken and split it in half as the rhino charged past them. "What do you think?" Naruto asked hopefully, looking up at his father, who observed it with a critical eye. "It has potential, but there are some things I don't like about it. I must go to a meeting now. Come along, I want you to go with me," Orochimaru said, and turned and walked away. Naruto looked on and frowned as he was hoping he would have been impressed by it. "Naruto," Zaku shouted out to him. "What did he say?" He said you guys did great," Naruto quickly said to them, trying to lift them and the others' spirits. "Tsunade has already sent word for our armies to combine and march to Iwagakure. No doubt pleased with our victory at Sekigahara," Orochimaru said, seated at the front of the table with Kabuto and several others. "The days of the Fourth Shinobi War have come to an end. It is only a matter of time before Otogakure replaces Iwa and is made one of the 5 hidden villages as the land returns to peace," Kabuto said to him. "Congratulations, Orochimaru-sama," Arashi Fuma said to him. Orochimaru smirked at their words. "Still, we must remain vigilant. I doubt those maggots are going to give up without a fight," Gurren cautioned the group. "And who knows? For all we know, Snow might attack us as well when our guard is down and we are busy dealing with the remnants of the Jashinists," Kimimaro Kagaya mentioned. Orochimaru nodded at them, but he was thinking of another threat. One that grew stronger with each passing day. In his mind the image of a man with unique eyes and wearing a black cloak with red clouds on it appeared, and he stood in front of the hidden rain village. "Fools. Whilst the coalition and Jashinists plot and scheme in their pathetic attempts to play war, one shall gather and capture the Jinchuriki and conquer the land in the name of Akatsuki," the Akatsuki leader Pain proclaimed as the area around him turned dark. "How many of the Jashin scum still stand before us?" he asked, and Kabuto stood up and unfurled a list on the table. "Here is that which will stand against us. They lost over half of their army at Sekigahara, and reports say that many of his most powerful generals, including Lu Xiang, fell in battle. You defeated Hidan yourself, my lord. Word has it also that many of the people who were pressed into serving the Jashinists have grown weary of the war. Several Earth Nins have also surrendered as well. Internal rebellion may soon take place in Earth even if we don't attack," he said, and Orochimaru nodded. "And how many of our forces still remain?" he mentioned, and Gurren stood up and unfolded a casualty list from Sekigahara. "Luckily we suffered the least amount of deaths in the battle, although we did lose Sakin and Ukin in it, leaving only Tuyuya left of the Sound Four. Sunagakure has pledged its support in the upcoming attack as well. Orochimaru-sama, what shall we do?" she asked him. "Gurren, you shall lead a small force tomorrow and break the hold on Yugakure they have. The rest of us shall make our way throughout Earth and defeat the Tsuchikage," he said to her, and she nodded and went to make her preparations. Presenting the cage, a ninja said, and the doors opened and the leader of Sunagakure entered. "Gaara, it's good to see you are well," Naruto said, standing up and walking towards him. "You as well. I trust you have recovered from the fatigue you endured during Sekigahara." The red-headed boy replied to him, a rare smile on his face. Oh no, if not for you and Sunagakure coming to our aid and informing us of Kage's forces moving out, we would have been overrun. Naruto said, refusing to take credit. If only I had the opportunity to defeat him, then we should not have to have another battle. Gaara said, referring to Kage escape as he had disappeared from the field. Don't blame yourself for what happened. With all that was happening, no one was able to keep an eye on him. But he's cornered like a rat and soon the war will end. The Fox vessel assured him. Indeed, for now we shall focus on gathering our strength and defeating the Jashinists. Gaara said to him, what actions shall be taken against the Jashin forces? Baki asked the assembled group. Leave that to me, Gaara spoke to them. Our forces can hold them at bay while the Leaf and Sound can move in and take Kage's head. Without his men to protect them, he'll be cut down like a weed. If that is all right with Orochimaru, he said, referring to the Otokage. Orochimaru looked at them and nodded, giving his approval of the diversion. All right then, we'll begin the march tomorrow. At the Konoha hospital. Your vitals are decreasing, you haven't ate, have you? The pink-haired medic asked the young boy lying on the bed with a plate of food. The boy didn't say anything, instead looked out the window of his room. Sakura Haruno looked on at the boy. Rinmara by name, who as a mission given to her was under her care until Tsunade looked at him. The boy was the late Raiga's partner and had been brought before them by Kurenai, and he was examined and his mysterious Kekkei Genkei was discovered, which was similar to the Byakugan but almost a mutation of it. The boy was unable to walk and laid absent-mindedly on the bed, not saying very much. You need to keep your strength up, Sakura said with a smile. The boy had seemed ready to give up and die after what had happened with the death of his master. The scenery's really beautiful at this time of day, she said, looking out the window with him. The boy didn't say anything in response. She looked out the window with him and saw to her surprise a small bolt of lightning shoot up into the air, which startled her. Sasuke, she said to herself as if feeling he was behind it. Sasuke cut and slashed at imaginary enemies as he held the Kiba blades in his hands, having taken them from Raiga Kurosuke and the new owner of them. Training with them, he felt the power surging through them, power that could be his. His own blade he had discarded had paled in comparison to Naruto's Kusanagi and Haku's Zanbato. He needed a blade powerful enough to give him an edge, and so he took the Kiba blades and sought to master them. Knowing if he could master them and defeat Naruto, he was one step closer to his goal. I will get stronger, I will use any method I can to do so, even if it means giving my soul, he said bitterly as he held the twin blades in his hands. Channeling his energy and chakra into them, a couple sparks of lightning came out of the swords as he examined the weapons. If I can channel these blades and master them, I will become closer to my goal. The image of his brother appeared in his thoughts and he gritted his teeth in fury over all that he did. Sasuke, he imagined him saying. It almost sounded as if his voice was real. I see you have improved. A voice said, surprising him, and he recognized it. Slowly he turned around and saw the person before him. You! He shouted and ran towards and jumped and slashed at him. Before he could cut him, he was blocked in midair with one hand stopping his attack and the other around his throat. It's been a long time, brother. Itachi said to him, the two staring face to face. You still live, yet you are still weak, he said, and casually flung him into a tree. Sasuke fell to the ground and looked up at his brother. It'll take more than a pair of stolen blades for you to kill me, he said, and Sasuke snarled and markings appeared on his body, and Itachi looked at him with bemused interest. Nor will the snake's seal help you. I'll kill you, Sasuke shouted and charged him. Before he could hit him, Itachi's eyes changed from the regular Sharingan to a different style. Several images appeared in Sasuke's mind as they flashed forward all of the way up to his family's deaths and seeing his brother standing over his father and mother. Reliving all of them all at once. You still lack the strength, Itachi's voice spoke to him, and it stopped, and Sasuke found himself on his knees looking up at his brother. I expected more out of you, your lack of killing intent disappoints me, Itachi said, looking down at him. When you get the strength, if you get the strength you desire so badly in order to kill me, I'll let you find me. Then you shall know the truth, he said, and slowly turned and left undetected by anyone, leaving the lone Uchiha a blank look on his face, unable to speak a word over what had just happened. Damn you, he whispered out slowly, finding himself able to talk again. That next day the Oto and Suna force was the first to begin the march to claim Iwagakure and end the life of the Tsuchikage. Konoha would join up with them the following day after they had gathered all their supplies and materials ready for a long siege if needed. Orochimaru, along with the Kage Gaara, divided the forces into two, with him as the leader of the first and Gaara as commander of the second. The two forces would split up and go throughout Iwa and dispose of any remaining Jushinists and opposing foes to ensure the roads would be open for the Leaf without the threat of attacks. Along the way, many of the surrounding villages in the land of Earth that were still under the control of the Jushinists were freed, driving them out and freeing the people glad to be gone of their tyranny. Within hours, all that remained of the Jushinists' grip was only Iwagakure. "Thank you. You've saved us all. We're finally free." The crowd of men, women, and children cheered as the Jushinists were being defeated and driven out. They, who had been oppressed into serving them, finally celebrating their freedom, hailing them as their saviors. "See," the bandaged ninja said to him. "Even though you were reluctant to attack, this is what the people wanted, they were waiting for us." Dosu Kinyuta said to Naruto. "I see, yeah, I guess you was right, Dosu." Naruto said as he saw Kimimaro be swarmed and thanked by several people, women offering to name their sons after him, the Kage unsure how to react. He looked around as him and the others were being thanked by the civilians. Due to being trained as merciless fighters, many of the sound nins didn't know what to do, unused to being thanked and praised, not expecting to be treated as heroes. He saw Tayuya doing her best to maintain her cool edge. She looked and their eyes locked together and she turned away, a blush starting to form on her face as she was thanked endlessly by a child. Naruto had a smile on his face as he stood and watched it unfold, as finally, what he, her, Haku, and the others had been fighting for was starting to come true. Standing on a hill overlooking the celebration by himself, Orochimaru allowed a rare smile to appear on his face, feeling as though the dream he and the woman he loved had, their child being accepted and hailed as a hero, was becoming a reality. Later on throughout the day, the two forces meet up and rejoined. Passing through Odawara Pass, which lead to Iwagakure, they prepared to make their final march. They were joined up by Tsunade and the Leaf, at last combining the coalition at its full power. Now at full strength, they looked ready to end the Fourth War once and for all. "This is it. Tomorrow it all ends," Tsunade said, seated at a table that night. We all have suffered and experienced, and some of us re-experienced the horrors and agony of war these past months. Those who lost their lives during the war shall never be forgotten. But tomorrow it shall end, and hopefully we will never have to suffer it again. We have the Jushinists cornered, but like a wounded beast they will not go quietly. We must cut off this beast's head to ensure no one will ever be threatened again by the Jushinists," she said as she and the three Sannin were seated there along with several others in the room. "Tomorrow we begin our attack on Iwagakure, and end the Jashin leader who has falsely claimed the title of Tsuchikage life." Jiraiya spoke up. "With his army crippled and many of his most powerful soldiers dead, we can at last put an end to him. Everyone, fight, knowing that tomorrow that peace can be restored and this nightmare can finally end." The onlooking group let out a cheer at his words. Later, a group of 4 stood in front of the 3 Sannin in private. "We have selected you 4 to infiltrate and slay the Tsuchikage tomorrow while we deal with the remnants tomorrow. This is a dangerous mission. If you are discovered, you'll be on your own, as you'll be behind enemy lines. If any of you wish to back out, you won't be thought less of, as this is basically an S-class mission," Tsunade said to the group. The group looked at the Sannin and at each other. "I accept," Kakashi said. "I'm in." Anko spoke as well. "I'll do it," Haku answered, his face serious. "Count me in. I want to end Kage's life myself after all he's done," Naruto said, standing there upright. "Very well then, we shall provide a distraction tomorrow when we engage the remnants of the Jushinists, that will allow you to slip into Iwagakure. There should be a secret passage you can find," Orochimaru said to them, and paused and looked at his son. "If by some chance your lives are put in danger, withdraw from the mission. By that time the coalition shall have defeated them and breached Iwagakure, then we can use our combined might to destroy him if you failed to do so." "Understood," the group said and nodded. "Good luck to you all, may you succeed and don't risk your life over anything stupid," Jiraiya said to them, and they bowed and left to prepare themselves for the task ahead. The Tsuchikage's chambers the next day. Kage Sosano stood in front of the large crystal, sensing that it had gained enough power. Grinning and uncaring that his remaining forces were about to be attacked, he stared at the crystal. "Now then, I know the first place to test out your power and enslave the world," he said, and fired his rings at the crystal, and an island with a bridge halfway finished being constructed came into view. At Wave, the bridge builder wiped the sweat off of his brow and face with his towel and looked at the constructed bridge. "Shouldn't you take a break now, father?" a voice said, and he saw his daughter and grandson walking towards him, handing him a glass of tea. "I still got a lot of work to do, Tazuna," the old man said as he was halfway done with rebuilding the great Naruto bridge. "Until this is complete, I'll work. Even you need to take a break, Gramps. All the other workers have left," Inari said to him. "Bah," Tazuna said, but smiled at his family. When Kage had destroyed the bridge a while back, Tazuna had sunk into despair over what had happened and seemed like he wouldn't come out of it. But hearing of Naruto fighting in the war that was going on had rekindled his spirit, and he set himself into rebuilding the bridge, making it even more wondrous than before. A symbol of how Wave would recover no matter what befell it. "Well, I'm going to get supper ready, come home in about an hour, both of you," Tsunami said and left. "We all have to do our part, Inari," Tazuna said as they overlooked the halfway done bridge. "Even putting a board down and nailing it goes a long way," he said to his grandson, who nodded. "Wave will recover from what that bastard did to us, we always will. If we give up, then everything Naruto and the others did for us is in vain." "Right," Inari said and went to help his grandfather when they heard a scream. "Mom!" he exclaimed, hearing it, and dropped what he was doing and ran. "Inari, wait," Tazuna said, fearing the worst as he ran after him. He caught up with the boy as they entered deeper into Wave. "What's going on?" he said as slowly a black mist-like substance started to appear around the village. "Mom!" Inari shouted as they reached the center of the village. The two looked and saw to their shock the entire village was there, kneeling with a blank look on their faces. Nothing was in their eyes, as if they were soulless. "All hail Jashin! All hail Jashin! All hail Jashin!" The crowd started to chant, chanting repeatedly and endlessly. "What's going on here?" Tazuna said as the bridge builder shook a man. "Snap out of it," he shouted, trying to make sense of this. Why was everyone acting like this? What had happened to them? "Inari, have you found Inari?" he exclaimed as he turned and saw the boy, a look of horror on his face. "No," he whispered, seeing what he saw. "All hail Jashin! All hail Jashin! All hail Jashin!" Tsunami chanted endlessly, her facial features blank and her eyes empty as she continued to say the three words. "Mom, Mom, it's me. Snap out of it," Inari said, shaking her to no avail. "Please, snap out of it, what's wrong with you?" he begged, tears forming in his eyes. Tazuna could only look on in horror at what he was seeing as black mist continued to engulf Wave. "All right, there's the signal, let's go," Kakashi said as they saw the battle begin. "Be quiet everyone, don't let yourself be spotted," he said, taking the lead, and the group began making their way stealthily, avoiding any battles. Knowing the success of the mission rested on them not being caught. Making their way, they snuck through the gates undetected and made their way throughout the empty streets of Iwagakure, the place looking deserted as no one was around. "There should be a secret passageway, right around here," Kakashi said, pressing against a stone wall near the temple. Feeling air coming from it, he pushed with all his might and removed it, revealing a narrow hallway. "Let's go," he said to Anko, Naruto, and Haku, and the group continued on their way. "Look at this entire place has been turned into one giant praying area," Anko said in disgust as they entered a room and saw several banners with the symbol of Jashin on it. Even the floor was covered with a large rug that had its symbol on it. She looked at the altar and saw that there was blood on it, as if there was a sacrifice recently. Naruto walked forward and stared at a statue in the middle of the room. It depicted a giant man holding a sword in one hand and a decapitated head in another. He looked at it as if something was off about it. Suddenly the lids of the decapitated man opened, revealing red eyes, and a beam of light shot out of them and hit him. "What the?" he shouted, covering himself, and suddenly he disappeared, shocking the others. Naruto found himself reappearing in midair and fell to the ground and landed on his feet. "What in the world? How the heck did I wind up here?" he said to himself as he was alone in the room. He had been teleported from everyone else and was now inside an empty room. Seeing a doorway, he made his way and exited the room, wondering just where he had gotten to. "I hope the others are all right," he said quietly. He went his way when he caught a glimmer of bright light coming from a room. Catching his attention, he made his way to a door that was opened a crack. Pushing it open, he found himself inside a room, and in the center of it was a large crystal that glowed ominously. "At last you have come," a man said, standing in the room. "You," Naruto shouted, seeing Kage Sosano standing there. He drew out Kusanagi and charged him and slashed at him. Kage dodged it and leapt over him and fired water from his rings, which hit Naruto in the chest and knocked him back into the crystal. Naruto went to charge him again when he felt something wrap around him. He looked and saw tendrils start to appear out of the crystal and wrap around his arms and legs, holding him in place. He struggled to break free, but they were solid and overwhelming him as one wrapped around his waist, holding him still, and he lost his grip on his sword and dropped it as the crystal ensnared him. Suddenly he felt a great pain shot throughout his body, and he yelled out in agony as he felt himself being drained of his energy. His yells echoed throughout the room as the crystal glowed brighter and brighter as if feeding off of him. "At Konoha. Here, I brought you an apple," the girl said, entering the boy's room. She looked over and smiled when she saw Rinmara asleep on his bed, breathing softly. She walked over and, checking his vitals, left it on his bed for him to eat when he wake up. She and some others had to stay behind to tend to the wounded. Despite the fact she wanted to go, she knew Tsunade, Kakashi, Naruto, Sasuke, and the others could end the war without her. She looked at the window and saw Ebisu chasing after Konohamaru and his friends after another one of their infamous pranks. She then saw something that startled her. "What the?" the pink-haired medic said, looking out the window as a mysterious mist started to set in across the village. "Genjutsu?" Sakura Haruno asked, not understanding as she hadn't heard anything about it being foggy today. Suddenly she heard something dropped and she turned her head and saw Ino having dropped the items she was carrying, a blank look on her face. "All hail Jashin," the blonde said suddenly. "All hail Jashin. Ino. Snap out of it," Sakura exclaimed when she suddenly heard more voices in the hospital. All the staff and the doctors and nurses in the hospital were chanting it. What's going on?" Sakura said, not understanding. "Come on." Tayuya at the battle shouted at the others, mentioning for them to continue fighting against the Jashinists. She took some down but saw to her surprise no one was joining her. "What the hell are you waiting for?" she shouted and turned around. To her surprise, all the others, Zaku, Choji, and those who had been engaged in battle with her had stopped what they were doing and had dropped their weapons and were kneeling on the ground. "All hail Jashin. All hail Jashin," the group chanted. "I suppose I should tell you now what this crystal is," Kage said as Naruto still struggled to break free. In Jashin's time he crafted and prepared an ultimate jutsu that would ensure his domination for all time. He hunted down 4 powerful dragons and slew them and took a claw from each of them. Weaving his power and chakra into them, he prepared to start his ultimate jutsu. Before he could do that, he was murdered by that wretched sage. Naruto, struggling, listened and thought of the sage he had seen in his dreams. Due to that, the claws were scattered to the far corners of the world. And only now have they been brought back together. "So what? Are you creating a doomsday weapon or something?" Naruto said in defiance. Kage laughed madly and shook his head. "No, what is the point of conquering the world if there is no one to rule over and worship you? You see the crystal and notices it's glowing. That means it's charging up, and once it is fully charged it will be capable of enslaving the entire world. By means of a black mist that will cover and engulf the land and brainwash everyone into being Jashin's servants. Wave itself has already fallen and accepted Jashin's rule. Soon Konoha shall as well, after that I'll take over Oto as well," he explained, and Naruto looked into the crystal and saw the inhabitants mindlessly kneeling and chanting Jashin. He saw Tazuna and Inari trying to get them to stop, but to no avail. "You bastard," he shouted at him. "Ha ha ha. But of course to create such mist requires vast amounts of chakra. In order to do it I needed a Jinchurki and the chakra that a Biju possesses. That is where you come in," Kage said to him tauntingly. "I will use your near-infinite chakra from the Kyuubi to power up my crystal, and it will spawn the mist which will spread first throughout the elemental nations and then through other parts of the world. In a few short hours I will have control of the entire world. Nothing will stop the age of Jashin from everlasting control. It will last a millennium and nothing should stand in Jashin's way as he rules over all." "You son of a," Naruto shouted, but felt pain shot through his entire body as he was being drained again of chakra by the crystal. He cried out in pain as he felt it go through his entire body and the crystal began to glow brighter and brighter. feeding off of him like a parasite, absorbing and draining his chakra. All this time you fools were playing right into my hand throughout the entire war. Did you really think if you defeated my army you had won? That I hadn't anticipated such outcomes. Kage said to him. It was all a part of my plan. I in fact sent many of my men to their deaths to stall you and prevent you from finding out my true plan and collect the claws. And finally, after all the setbacks, all the frustrations and delays, I finally have you beaten, and to make things even more sweeter it will be you the one who creates the world ruled by Jashin. No, Naruto said weakly. Kage turned to the crystal and smirked at what he saw. What's this? Your friends and allies are coming your aid, he said, and Naruto looked and saw Haku, Kakashi, and the others running through the palace. How predictable, he said, and aimed a hand and fired a beam at the crystal from his rings. The group of ninjas ran as fast as they could, pushing their bodies to the limit and using their chakra. They knew they had to get there before it was too late. Kakashi. Guys. A voice shouted, and they stopped when they recognized it as Naruto. Over here. Come this way quick. I'm fighting Kage and I need your help now. We can beat him if we hit him with everything we got, but we only have one shot before his guards come. We got to do it now. I'm coming, Naruto. Haku shouted and ran towards the voice, refusing to stop. Something doesn't seem right, Kakashi said, as this didn't make any sense. The group was unaware that they were being led into a trap. No. Haku, get them out of there. For once in your life don't listen to me. Naruto shouted, looking on at them. He heard Kage laughing mockingly at him. Do you really think a puppet would disobey a puppeteer's commands? Kage asked him. Naruto glared at him as he looked down at him smugly. Your friends have fallen right into my trap, and they shall be the first sacrifices to usher in Jashin's world, he exclaimed. His rings glowed and suddenly beams of energy shot out of them. Naruto. Brother, where are you? Haku shouted, running into the wall. The group had come to a lit room where they had heard Naruto calling for them. This doesn't feel right, Anko said, looking around as her and Kakashi felt as if that wasn't Naruto calling out to them. We've been set up, Kakashi exclaimed, his eye going wide as he felt it. Suddenly beams shot into the room and hit the floor, and the floor disappeared beneath their feet. The group fell into a dark pit as they heard terrible mocking laughter echo all around them as they plummeted into the darkness. No, Naruto shouted, looking on in horror as they disappeared from view. Aw man, we're in a big mess. Naruto, please hang on, Haku exclaimed as they continued falling. Chapter 86. The group continued falling into the darkness with no end in sight. Suddenly they crashed into something at the bottom. Landing with a thud, the group laid there trying to recover from their fall. A light appeared and a door opened and several Jashinists walked in. Bind them, they are to be taken to be sacrificed to Jashin-sama, the leader of the group ordered, and they went to do so. Suddenly Kakashi, who wasn't as wounded as the others, leapt up and drove a kunai into a man's face who fell over dead, surprising them. The copy nin made hand symbols and created several copies made of water and had them fight the Jashinists. Anko. Haku, get up, he shouted at the others, starting to recover. Anko shook the cobwebs loose, and when one attempted to apprehend her, she summoned several snakes to bit his face. Haku. He shouted at the boy, finally starting to get up. Get out of here, find Naruto. We'll deal with the rest here. Find him and alert the others as to what's going on, he said, and mentioned to a window which was only large enough for him to fit through. Now. He shouted and shoved him towards it. The boy nodded and fit his way through the window, taking him outside. Kakashi, seeing him leave, rejoined the battle as he and Anko fought on against them. Gotta find a way to get to Naruto, Haku muttered as he was outside. He didn't see anything for him to climb on. He looked around and noticed a glow coming from the top. Figuring that to be where Naruto would be, he knew he had to get there. Channeling his Kekkei Genkai, he focused his bloodline on the all and fully concentrating turned the way to solid ice. I'm coming, brother, he said, and getting two kunai stabbed into the ice and began climbing his way up there. I won't leave you, not now and not ever. Something's going on here. Where did this mist come from? Jiraiya spoke, looking around the field as a thick black-like mist started to form. This doesn't feel right, he muttered as he looked around. Toad Sanin. A blur went past him and he saw Might Guy appearing before him. Something appears to be wrong. I can see that, this mist isn't natural, he said, looking on. Tsunade sensed it as well. She looked around over the field and saw as the mist started to engulf the area. Tsunade-sama. Shizune shouted at her. Half of our forces have stopped fighting, they have just stopped what they were doing, I'll never seen anything like this. She exclaimed, and Tsunade looked on and saw that many of them had stopped fighting and were on their knees, a blank look on their faces, as if something had taken control of them. It's this mist, she muttered looking on. It's affecting them somehow and it's getting closer, she said as it inched closer and closer, starting to engulf everything in its path. With half the coalition unable to fight now, the Jushinists were fighting with twice as much fierceness as they took the advantage. Forming hand symbols, she cast a jutsu and a barrier formed around the field, blocking and halting the mist's advance, yet still they came as if trying to break through it. Her eyes narrowed, feeling as if it was getting stronger with each second. Orochimaru had remained quiet thus far and had noticed what was happening. He saw as one ninja was fighting, yet when the mist neared him he stopped all of a sudden and kneeled and starting chanting. He looked around as the battle still went on, but it was obvious that they were losing. Something was happening that was causing all this. Naruto, he said and clutched a fist as if feeling that something was happening to him. He looked and faintly saw a glow in the distance. I'm coming, my child. Naruto, bound and trapped by the crystal, let out a cry as he continued being drained of chakra by it, feeling it sapping his energy as the crystal glowed brighter and brighter, feeding off of him. Feel the emptiness, feel the loss of hope engulf you, Kage taunted him. Know that everything you did was in vain, know that you shall be the one who brings Jashin's dream into fruition, he claimed as the rings on his fingers glowed. Naruto didn't say anything in response. The crystal showed images of what had happened. He saw Tayuya still fighting, but even she was starting to get overwhelmed by them. He's right, I blew it. It's cause of me we lost, he said in his thoughts. Everyone, Haku, Tayuya, Anko, Otusan and the others. They are all going to die or be slaves because of me. Have you nothing left to say? Have you finally accepted your defeat? Kage asked him smugly. Perhaps you are not descended from his line after all, he said and turned and left the room, leaving him there to dwell in his thoughts. Haku outside continued climbing, refusing to give up. Climbing up the wall, he continued his ascent. He knew he had to get there before it was too late. He suddenly felt a dark presence and stopped what he was doing as he felt a murderous intention coming from inside. He stopped and stayed there, not even moving an inch as he felt it go by. After several tense moments he felt it disappear and he continued climbing. At Yugakure, Guren's force had driven out the Jushinists, freeing the village, but the black mist had appeared and surrounded the area. Like wave in most of Konoha, the village of hot water inhabitants as well as Guren and the others were kneeling, chanting all hail Jashin as well, completely under his command. Sakura at the hospital looked around and gasped outside the window as she saw several other villagers and those who had remained kneeling in the center and had began chanting. What's going on? Ever since that mist appeared, people have been acting crazy, she asked herself looking on. Suddenly she felt a presence behind her. She turned and saw Ino standing there, a scalpel in her hand. All who oppose Jashin must die, Ino said and swung it at her. Sakura cried out and brought the clipboard she had up just in time, blocking it. Ino pulled back and swung at her again and Sakura dodged it. Ino, stop it, Sakura shouted at her. Ino, having been brainwashed along with the others, didn't listen and slashed at her, aiming for her throat. Sakura dodged it and smacked at her hand, causing her to lose her grip on it. Ino tackled her and knocked her to the floor and got on top and tried to put her hands around her throat and choke her. If it hadn't been for Tsunade's teaching, Sakura would have met her end as she had gotten stronger and managed to remove her hands. Overpowering Ino, she knocked her off. Snap out of it, she shouted and slugged her across the face, knocking her onto the ground. Getting some rope, she then tied Ino up and prevent her from moving. She then put her in a storage room and closed the door, making sure she couldn't get out. Making her way back to the room, she closed and locked the door and barricaded it with a chair. She looked out the window again, wondering just what was going to happen. Tayuya fought on against the Jushinists who still came at them. Damn it, she shouted, dodging a swing. What the hell is wrong with you dumbasses? She shouted at a group, seeing them just kneel there, a blank look on their faces, not fighting back at all. Suddenly a mist started to engulf around her, and Tayuya heard voices in her head telling her to submit. She found herself feeling a bit lightheaded as more started to appear and more voices spoke up telling her to surrender to Jashin. No, I don't serve scumbags, She shouted, denying it and fighting it off. She ran from it in. The mist pursued her and was stopped by Tsunade's barrier, unable to get past it. Naruto stood there, his head down, not even feeling the pain going through his body as he was drained of his chakra and life force. It was all over, he had failed. The crystal, as if feeling him losing his resolve, showed images of what was going on. What was happening in Wave: Sakura fleeing for her life. Kakashi and Anko fighting for their lives against nearly 100 enemies. The coalition losing against the Jashinists and his friends being brainwashed and forced to serve Kage and his god. Breaking his will as he felt as if everything had been in vain. I guess I couldn't fulfill my promise at the Peach Garden after all. He said quietly to himself. He closed his eyes, feeling that it was all over. Naruto. A voice shouted, and he thought it was his imagination or the crystal playing more tricks on him. I have finally found you, brother. The voice cried out, and he opened his eyes and saw Haku standing in front of him. I am here at last. Haku, what are you doing here? Naruto said, surprised to see him standing before him. He thought he was dead after seeing him plunge into the darkness. I have come to free you, brother, hold on. He said, and pulling out his Zanbato took it in his arms and slashed at the tendrils holding him. The mighty blade cut right through them, tearing them apart. More sprouted and tried to ensnare Haku, but he fought them off, and after destroying more of them he grabbed Naruto and using all his strength pulled him free. Come on, we got to get out of here, he said, and led him from the room. Seeing Kusanagi on the floor, he got it as well and strapped it to his pants. Kage, standing on top looking on as the new world Jashin had envisioned was nearing completion, sensed something. He's escaped, he shouted, feeling his presence. Find him, he shouted into his rings which glowed, sending orders out to his men to find and recapture Naruto. Come on, we're almost there, we gotta find the others and get out of here. I'm sure one of the Sannin can figure out a way to defeat him. Haku said, leading a weak Naruto through the halls, Naruto leaning on him for support. He looked at him and noticed how sick and pale he looked, as if drained of his entire life force from what the crystal did to him. No, listen Haku, I gotta go back. Naruto said to him and breathed hard, trying to regain his strength. I gotta stop Kage, if I don't stop him, everyone will become his slaves. He said and tried to turn around and go back, but was still too weak and fell to his knees. How do you plan on doing that? Crawl up to him and threaten to bite his toes off. Haku asked him dryly as he was in no shape to fight. If I have to, Naruto said and let out a cough. If he isn't stopped, everyone we know and everything we fight for will be destroyed. You, me, Otusan, Tayuya, and all the others, he'll kill them all. He said weakly and stood up. A roar was heard suddenly and they turned and saw Wamok and Kage's other elite bodyguards. Wamok, upon seeing Haku, let out a snarl as if remembering what he did at Wave. Damn it. Haku cursed and unsheathed his weapon. Try and stay behind me, Naruto, Naruto. He said and turned and looked and saw Naruto had left, going a different direction. He was unable to go after him when the five charged at him and he entered the fray. Naruto moved as quickly as he could. It pained him to abandon Haku like that, but he knew this was something he had to do. He had to find Kage and kill him. That would end it. But he was so weak, his entire body felt as if it had aged 100 years. Leaning against a wall for support, he struggled to continue on. He went to move, but he lost his footing, his remnants of strength giving out, and fell to the ground. He laid there not moving, lying very still, unable to move a muscle. A warm glow suddenly appeared before him, filling him with warmth and relieving him of the pain that coursed through his entire body. Naruto, feeling his strength return, lifted his head up and gasped at what he saw. A sage stood before him, smiling at him as he looked down at him. His face peaceful and calm, and yet Naruto felt a great power coming from him. Raise, the sage said, and bent down and lowered his hand. Naruto looked at his offered hand and, feeling his strength returning, grasped it with his hand and was pulled up by the man, who disappeared after doing so. Naruto felt all his strength returning, as if everything that had been drained had been restored to him. His energy, his chakra, all of it was back. I know what I have to do, he said, and started walking and broke off into a run. Knowing where he had to go, he came to a room and kicked the door open, and inside it was Kage. The madman's eyes focused on him. This ends now, Kage. Naruto shouted at him. I have had enough of you. Kage snarled at him. I will see to it that you will not last to see Jashin's world. The world you seek is one that will never happen. I know the type of world that wants to be formed and it's nothing like the twisted one you and Jashin wants. Naruto responded. Kage growled and all 8 rings on his fingers glowed. Join that accursed sage in death. He shouted and fired all 8 rings at him. Naruto stood his ground as they were about to hit him when a figure appeared in front of him and summoning Rashomon stopped the attack. When the attack stopped, Naruto looked and saw who was standing before him. Otusan. He shouted as Orochimaru had appeared in the nick of time and blocked the attack with the gate. Orochimaru, so we meet at last. Kage said as the snake Sannin glared at him. I thought you would have been a perfect worshipper of Jashin, we are both alike. We are both agents of chaos and seek to bring this world under our control. Jashin loathed the idea of peace and order, unless it was under his order and rule. You share that same goal he has. I'm nothing like the man I once was, I've shedded that part of me forever, that person who did the things he did is dead. Orochimaru responded to him. Kage laughed in amusement. A snake cannot change his fangs or who he was, no matter how many times he sheds his skin. He taunted Orochimaru who glared at him. To think a man who was obsessed with obtaining immortality and gaining the truth of the world would allow himself to become so weak. Shut up. Orochimaru shouted and doing hand symbols fired a jutsu at him. Kage responded by summoning a series of skulls which blocked the attack. Orochimaru then formed more hand symbols and summoned a giant snake in the room which attacked Kage and knocked him through the wall of the room. Father and son looked and saw Kage struggling grasping the giant snake's mouth with his bare hands as he tried to prevent it from eating him. His rings glowed and he fired a beam of energy into its mouth and through its head killing the summon. You are not the only ones with summons. Jackals come forth. He shouted and summoned 2 giant demonic-looking jackals with large claws and fangs. Tear them apart. He ordered them and they charged the 2. Naruto and Orochimaru dodged the snapping jaws at them as the wild beasts attacked them. Orochimaru dodged an attack and was suddenly bit on the arm by one and it held him in place and the other one came back aiming for his throat looking to tear it out. Orochimaru extended his head and dodging the attack bit down on it with his own fangs causing the beast to yelp in pain. He threw the other one off of him and summoned his Kusanagi. Naruto saw one of the jackals charge him and dodged its snapping fangs. The summon came at him biting and barking and knocked him down. The beast was on top of him, its eyes murderous. Naruto blocked its snapping jaws and getting an explosive tag lit it and stuffed it into its mouth and kicked it off. The beast leapt at him and exploded in midair, the paper bomb going off killing it. Orochimaru dodged a bite and swung his Kusanagi and beheaded the other jackal. A beam of energy shot out at them from Kage's rings and Orochimaru dodged it. Jashin style. Eternal flame. He shouted and a stream of fire fired out of his ring at him. Orochimaru ducked behind a pillar and felt it get hotter and hotter as he saw that the stone was melting due to the intense heat. He prepared a counter jutsu and suddenly the entire area around him was covered in ice. Kage blasted it with his fire but could not melt it as the temperature in the room dropped severely. He then felt something and looked at his feet and saw that had become trapped in ice and his lower body reaching to his waist was being frozen. Now you die. Orochimaru shouted and fired another powerful jutsu. Kage reacted quickly and formed a barrier around himself. He then fired a skull made of energy from his ring at Orochimaru, hitting him in the chest and knocking him backwards as the ice started to disappear. Kage. Naruto shouted and he turned and saw Naruto charging him. The boy leapt up and summoned several multiple snakes to attack him. Forming his barrier again, he stopped the attack. He fired a blast from his rings which Naruto either by skill or luck dodged it and it destroyed a portion of the room they were in. Kage summoned his mace and swung at him, missing and destroying a wall. He swung again and destroyed more the room as Naruto dodged his attacks. Elsewhere, Haku dodged the 5 attacks aimed at him as he fought against Wamok and the others. Ducking under a swing, he pulled out Naruto's Kusanagi and stabbed one in the thigh, hearing him cry out in pain. He was hit in the face and knocked down and lost his grip on both of them. Wamok prepared to kill him when Haku rolled out of the way and retrieving his Zanbato blocked the next attack as he continued fighting on against them. Kakashi and Anko, having worked together, had defeated 50 enemies, but there was still hundreds left and they continued to fight on, buying the others time. Outside, Tsunade looked on, a concerned look on her face as her barrier was starting to weaken as the mist continued to attack it and would soon break through at this rate. Kage swung at Naruto and missed and was surprised to be met with a block. He saw Orochimaru's blade blocking the attack. The two engaged in a test of strength and Orochimaru, the better weapon user, overpowered him and slashed him right across his chest, which would have killed him if he hadn't been for his armor he was wearing, which saved his life and deflected it. Orochimaru swung Kusanagi at him and he blocked it with his mace. His rings began glowing and he grinned, surprising Orochimaru, and an explosion engulfed both of them. "Otusan!" Naruto shouted as he saw him come out of the smoke. He ran towards his father and saw him on all fours. "I'm all right, watch out!" he shouted and grabbed the boy and put him behind him. He cried out as a dagger stabbed into his shoulders, thrown by Kage, who threw another and another, hitting him in the back with each one. "What's wrong? I thought a Sannin could live up to his reputation." Kage taunted him. "Or has your fondness for your son weakened you?" Orochimaru reached up and pulled out the daggers and, glaring at him, began casting Hadin symbols. "Die!" he shouted and summoned a giant cobra made of fire right at Kage, shocking him. The snake hissed and slammed into him, going through the wall and destroying more of the palace. The dust cleared and neither of the two could see him. They looked around and Naruto saw the crystal in the background. Still it glowed, supplying the mist which was enslaving and brainwashing everyone. "We have to destroy it," Naruto said to Orochimaru, who looked at him and at the crystal. "I think not," a voice proclaimed, and coming out of the rubble floating in the air due to his rings was Kage. "Die!" he shouted and fired more beams of energy from them. The two leapt to the side and dodged it. Kage then fired a quick blast and hit Naruto in the stomach, knocking him back. "Enough!" Orochimaru shouted and formed hand symbols. "I promised Kushina I wouldn't use this jutsu again, as it could destroy an entire village if let loose, but for you I'll make an exception." Lighting style. Raijin's destruction. A blue demon-like being appeared in the center of the room, carried a ring of drums. Bringing its hands up, it slammed into the drums and suddenly the entire room was filled with lightning, destroying everything in its path. The room was torn apart and destroyed as everything the lightning hit was turned to rubble and destroyed. Naruto, seeing them coming at him, ducked and hit the floor and covered his head to dodge them. Kage tried to dodge them but was hit with multiple bolts of lightning across his body. Raijin then slammed his hands on his drums one final time and summoned a gigantic bolt which destroyed even more of the room. Naruto lifted his head and saw that it had destroyed nearly everything, as he could see outside and saw the black mist forming around. He looked and saw his father standing there and saw Kage lying on the ground not moving. It appeared as if he was dead. Orochimaru looked over at Naruto and went to help him when he felt something hit in the back. He yelled in pain and turned and saw Kage seated up, his rings glowing. What? That could kill an entire squadron of Jonins. It could have even killed Sarutobi. He shouted in disbelief, as no one ever survived that attack the few times he used it. Kage coughed out blood as that had nearly killed him. His armor was scorched and ruined and he had trouble seeing out of one eye. "Once again my devotion to Jashin-sama saves me from Shinami's embrace. I will not let the age of Jashin be stopped." He shouted and fired another beam, hitting Orochimaru in the chest. Orochimaru suddenly felt as if he had gotten heavier, as if gravity was constricting him, as he was forced to lay on the floor and couldn't move. "What would you have done if I had been killed?" Kage taunted him, standing up. "Destroy the crystal, don't make me laugh. You would have used it to take control of the elemental nations and then the world, just like I am doing. You try to claim you have changed, but you haven't at all. A man who has done the things you have done cannot change." He taunted him and began crushing him with the pull on him. "After I've killed you, I will use your son to continue charging the crystal and make it so no one, not the other Sannins, not even Akatsuki, even its true leader, can stop me. They will all bow before Jashin," he said and grinned sadistically as Orochimaru felt his body being crushed by the pull of gravity against his body, feeling his insides being crushed. "Say goodbye to the world you know, this is Jashin's world," he shouted and prepared to kill him. "I don't think so," a voice shouted, and he wiped around and his eyes widened when he saw Naruto, having not seen him. The boy was running towards the crystal, his father's Kusanagi in hand. "The world you seek will never happen. I'll stop it now. Get away from that," Kage shouted and fired a blast from his rings at him. Naruto felt the pain but ignored it and, bringing the sword overhead, delivered and chop onto the crystal. Cracks started to form on it as it started to break. Naruto let out a cry and formed a ball of energy in his hand, pouring all his power into it. For a moment, Kyuubi's aura formed around him as he charged it up. Rasengan. He shouted and fired the attack right at the center of the crystal. The crystal became covered in cracks and shattered, releasing all the chakra that had been stored up in it. A bright light engulfed where they were standing, and freed from its confinement the chakra became a giant wave and came right at Kage. Orochimaru and Naruto looked on as they heard him screaming in agony as he was being consumed by it. Retribution for all he had done to everyone. This can't be. Kage shouted as his rings shattered and he was consumed by the wave of chakra. N. He shouted as his body faded away from the world, ending the Jashin leader at long last. The wave of chakra engulfed the entire area, bathing it in its light. It reached the praying room and upon touching the banners destroyed them, tearing them to shred. The statue upon being touched was turned to rubble. Haku was about to be killed by Wamok when a bright light engulfed him and the others. He heard a cry and he looked on as he saw them turn into dust, leaving nothing left. Kakashi and Anko, surrounded on all sides, standing back to back, nodded at each other, ready to go down fighting to their last. Before they could, the light entered the room and they looked on in amazement as the Jashinists were killed and turned to dust, sending them watching on in awe as the bright light illuminated the entire area. "It's beautiful," Anko whispered, looking on and looked out the window. The light covered all of Iwagakure and soon came onto the battlefield. When it touched the Jashinists they too turned to dust. When it touched the Earth Nins they were ignored as they looked on in disbelief. Upon touching those who had been brainwashed they felt themselves bathed in the light and cleansed and removed of their hypnotizing. Tayuya was about to be run through when the wave touched them and turned her would-be killers to dust. She looked around, confusion on her voice. "Naruto," she whispered, feeling as if he had done this. "What just happened?" Baki said, looking on with Gaara and his siblings. "I don't know," Gaara said, looking on as well. The Kage looking on at the wave of chakra consumed the area, his brother and sister in hushed awe. "Whoa," the bushy-browed boy said, standing up, no longer hypnotized. "Did I just have an out-of-body experience?" Rock Lee exclaimed, looking on, wondering what had been going on as he was no longer. "Amazing," Kabuto said, as he hadn't seen anything like this, not even in the books about the Shinobi Wars. "Did I just eat 100 ribs without stopping again?" Choji said, looking around, not understanding. When the light touched the mist was driven back and removed, being destroyed, no match for its purity. The mist faded away. At Yugakure, "All hail Jashin, all hail," the people in Guren's force continued to chant when suddenly something came over them. What just happened?" Guren said, shaking her head. She looked around at the others who were equally as confused. "At Wave, Mom," Inari said as his mother clutched her head. "Inari, what are you doing here? How did I get here?" she said, confused as the last thing she remembered she was at home starting to get supper ready. "You're all right," Inari exclaimed and hugged her, knocking her backwards. Not understanding, she returned the hug. Looking on, Tazuna freely let tears fall out of his eyes, seeing his daughter and everyone else recover. At Konoha, Sakura opened the door as she had looked outside the window and saw that the mist had disappeared. She looked around and saw everyone in the hospital returning to what they were doing before, some of them confused over what had happened but got over it. A loud banging sound was heard and she remembered what she did and went over to the storage room and opened it and saw Ino banging her feet against the wall. "Forehead girl, I should have known you did this. What kind of joke was this?" Ino shouted at her, struggling to get free from the rope with little success. "Get me out of here now. Hey, don't shut that door. Untie me." "What does this mean, Tsunade?" Shizune asked the Hokage, who had a smile on her face, looking on at what had happened. "It means the war is finally over," she answered, and a tear of happiness fell out of her eye. The coalition was cheering and celebrating their victory, having won the war. "We won," Jiraiya said as the remaining Earth Nins were surrendering to them. Stepping outside, father and son looked on as the Fourth Shinobi War was finally over. They watched as the last remnants of Jashin's mist disappeared forever, never again to threaten anyone. "It's over, the Fourth Shinobi War has come to an end," Orochimaru stated as he and Naruto looked on. He looked over at his son, who looked back at him. "I am proud of you, Naruto. You have come into your own as a ninja and proven yourself worthy as the future Otokage. For now, let us enjoy the hard-won peace." Naruto looked at him and looked up as the sun finally showed itself as everything, all the battles, all the fights, all the killing, it was finally over. Chapter 87. At Konoha, the Hidden Leaf Village, there was much to celebrate as many people cheered and partied at what had happened. It was over, the Fourth Shinobi War had come to an end and the coalition of Konoha, ZODIVK, and Sunagakure had emerged victorious, defeating the Jushinists and ending their mad conquest. Their leaders were dead and the army had been destroyed to a man. Iwagakure had surrendered to them, thus ending the war. As of now, many people were celebrating, cheering over their resounding victory. Naruto walked through Konoha dressed in casual clothing as he made his way, looking on as ninja and people from Leaf, Sound, and Sand were celebrating. A smile formed on his face as he looked on, seeing the three villages celebrating and having put aside their differences and had overcome the Jushinists. "Hey there," a voice said, and he turned and saw Tayuya walking towards him. Naruto stopped and looked for a moment as the redhead was out of her ninja clothing. She was wearing a light red kimono with blue flowers on it. "Never thought there'd be a celebration here for what you did you?" she asked, standing beside him. Naruto looked at her and back at the celebrating people. Before the war had happened, he had never dreamed the scene before him would happen. He still remembered how he was treated before, but he had learned to move on from it and instead focus on the future. "Come on," he mentioned to her. "Let's walk." The two walked through the village, looking on at the festivities that were happening in it. For Tayuya it was a bit overwhelming as she hadn't expected this. Being hailed as a hero in the war. She had her new flute with her and both him and her looked around the celebrations. Seeing the people of all three villages celebrating. At long last the war is finally over. Naruto said as he looked on. "I hear Oto is going to replace Iwa as one of the 5 hidden villages and Otusan will be fully recognized as a Kage." He said to her. "Yeah, to think we attacked this place, and now the people are hailing us as heroes," Tayuya said, referring to the failed attack. "Almost hard to believe," she said as they walked around. They looked and saw several other people and stopped at a packed Ichiraku's and talked with Kyuki and his daughter. Haku, dressed in a plain brown kimono, looked on at the celebrations. Seeing the family clans such as the Inazukas celebrating, he allowed a smirk to form on his face as he saw Kiba chase after Akamaru, who was chasing after the cat who belonged to the wife of the fire daimyo, into a crowd. He watched on as Dosu and Shikamaru silently congratulated each other over the strategies they had done and performed, the two having become friends and currently engaged in a game of Go. Seeing Anko having too much sake and having to be led away by Iruka, who despite his attempts to get her to walk steady was being led into a dance with the purple-haired Kunoichi. Seeing Choji stuffing his face with his father as onlookers looked on at how much they consumed and being chastised for eating all of the food. He looked on and saw Hinata wearing a light purple kimono walking with Kurenai, the Jonin carrying Rinmara on her back the same way Raiga had done. Haku knew Rinmara was in a new world, but he was confident once Tsunade healed him that the boy would move on. "Ahem," a voice said, and he turned and saw a figure with white eyes walk towards and stop beside him. "Hiyashi-sama," Haku said respectfully to the head of the Hyuga clan. "Our first meeting did not go so well, Haku," Hiyashi said to him. "Perhaps I may have been wrong about you," he said, and Haku looked back at him. "You do understand it was just a father's protectiveness towards his child." "I understand," Haku replied. "Hinata, after she was returned to me, confronted me and told me she had disguised herself as a man in order to prove me that she wasn't the weakling I deemed her to be," Hiyashi said as both looked on at the heiress of the clan. "In that meeting she showed me more strength and fire than she has done in 12 years. Claiming that ever since she had been born no one ever bothered to give her confidence until she met you and inspired her to get stronger." Hiyashi paused for a moment as if considering his next words. "I grant you permission," he said slowly. "I grant you permission to see my daughter and continue helping her improve. Although I have always acted cold at her, deep down I am proud of her for standing on her own feet finally," he said with a small smile. "You may continue to help her and perhaps Neji can help her as well. But only that, nothing more," he said and walked away. Haku watched him go, knowing that that was his way of giving his approval of him seeing her. He looked back and smiled as he saw Hinata. "I still say I outperformed you in the war, Zaku," Rock Lee proclaimed, seated at a table eating with several other ninjas. "Will you stop? Let's just call it a tie," Zaku said to him, trying to ignore him. "No, there must be a winner." Lee said in response. I propose we have a race, from here to the land of fire border and back, the first one back is the winner. He said all serious in his voice. Why that short? Let's race all the way to ZODIVK. Zaku responded and a gleam appeared in Lee's eyes at that. Ho ho. I accept your challenge, Lee said and got up and removed his clothes revealing his green jumpsuit. I'll prove my youthful spirit is greater than yours. He shouted and dashed off in a green blur. Zaku remained there and smirked watching him go. That'll keep him busy for an hour, he said and sat back down knowing he wouldn't be bothered. Hey Zaku, a voice said and he turned and looked at who called his name. Hey Kikin, he said his eyes widening at the girl before him. The sound Kunoichi was. Wearing a green kimono with lilies on it and she carried in her hands a small fan and she had makeup on her face with her hair done in a bow style with ribbons in it. Wanna dance? She asked him who was tongue-tied. Yeah, sure, he said as red formed on his cheeks as he stumbled over himself. Kin let out a laugh and took him by the hand as the two made their way. What a beautiful night, Sakura said seated down on a bench looking up at the moon. I haven't enjoyed a night like this since the Genin test. Well, let's hope we can enjoy nights like these for a long time. A voice said and she turned and saw Kakashi standing next to her. Unlike the others, he was still in his ninja getup. After you experience war, you learn just how much peace is truly treasured, he said to her as the two looked around. Hopefully there will be no more wars for a long, long time. Sakura nodded at him and looked around the sights. It's too bad Naruto won't join us back, but he's made his own choice and we're friends now. Kakashi nodded. He may be of a different village but I still consider him a part of Team 7, both Sound and Leaf are a part of him despite how he was hostile to us at first. I believe he will be the key to ensuring that this truce turns into a friendship between Konoha and Oto, he said and she looked at him and knew he was smiling under his mask. Kakashi saw the elders of the village including Danzo who were congratulating the Leaf Nins. He noticed he didn't talk to any of the Sound or Suna ninjas but he didn't let that bother him. There would still be some bumps in the road and Danzo would be one of them. Sakura looked around and for a moment saw Sasuke. The Uchiha wasn't taking part in much of the celebration but the fact he was there did her some good. Hey, a voice said and they turned and saw Naruto and Tayuya walking towards them and joining them. Hello Naruto, Kakashi said to them. Good to have you join us. Yeah, Naruto said and looked in the distance and smiled when he saw a peach blossom tree covered with paper lanterns. Something you see? Tayuya asked him. It reminds me, that tree, Naruto responded to her and the others. It reminded me of the oath in the garden that me and Haku made when we became brothers to bring an end to the war, he said and the others looked on and smiled as well. Sasuke was walking through the crowd paying no attention to the others. He made his way and soon came to an empty section. I got your note, a voice said and he looked and saw a figure leaned against the wall. You wanted to see me, is that right? The pale man said to Sasuke. Orochimaru, you know what I want. What I desire, Sasuke said to him. Orochimaru looked over at the Uchiha, his eyes still reminding him of his brother. You seek power, that much I know. The power to avenge your family's death. I need you to train me, teach me how to harness this power that I can obtain in order to slay my brother. Train me, so that I can finally put an end to him, Sasuke said to him. Orochimaru looked at him. Does it mean that much to you? Gaining the power to kill Itachi. You gathered the power to try and destroy Konoha, didn't you? Sasuke answered back and he frowned in response. The way I see it, we're no different, we both want revenge for what happened. Wretched boy, Orochimaru mumbled. You have the Kiba swords of the Hidden Mist swordsman, that will do. It's not enough, Sasuke shouted back. They are just a piece of the puzzle, there is still much that I must do before I can defeat him. If I can't defeat him, then everything my clan lived for in having found Konoha will be meaningless. Orochimaru glared at him. There was things they did he had no clue they had done. They weren't always the righteous heroic figures history portrayed the Uchiha clan as. Itachi is a member of Akatsuki, from what I heard they are after the Jinchuriki that includes Naruto, your son, Sasuke said to him, and Orochimaru bared his teeth showing his fangs. Itachi was the one in charge of capturing Naruto, he would never forget what he had told him. Train me and I can stop him and save Naruto. Only a Sharingan user can counteract another Sharingan user. Very well, Orochimaru said after a long moment. I will train you, in private. So that no one knows, I will train you in secret and help you get stronger so you can kill Itachi. But remember, I sought your body once and your eyes for me to be able to stop Akatsuki, who's to say I won't do it again? That's a risk I'm willing to take. Sasuke said and turned around and walked out of the empty street. To those who've fallen in battle so that we shall continue to live and fight on. Ibiki Morino standing at a makeshift shrine with a set of lit candles on it said to the small group raising his glass of sake. The others, including Gurren, Asuma, Baki, and several other shinobi nodded and raised their glasses toasting the fallen. Kidomaru, Jirobo, Sakin and Ukin, and the others who had lost their lives in the wars. The group downed their drinks vowing to never forget those who had died. The Kage seated with his brother and sister looked on as he witnessed the celebration. It was something different, his life had changed ever since he had surprisingly been picked to be the next ruler of Sunagaku. The people unlike before had come to accept Gaara. Naruto's words had stuck with him, telling him that he wasn't alone as he thought he was and that it was his friends and family that inspired him to fight even against all odds. Saying that when a person fights for something other than himself he'll gain more power than 100 men. And seeing his relationship with Haku and the others Gaara knew he was right. Looking on, Gaara allowed a rare smile to form on his face as perhaps there indeed was hope for him and he wasn't doomed to the life of loneliness he thought he was. What's wrong Naruto? Tayuya asked the boy later on noticing him staring at the table where the three Sannin were seated at. You've been looking over at Orochimaru-sama and the others for quite some time. It's nothing, he said and turned and looked at her smiling and then back at Orochimaru, Tsunade, and Jiraiya the three seated together but not saying anything to one another but mutual respect between them. Almost appearing on friendly terms with each other for the first time in many a year. Together those three are perhaps unbeatable. He mentioned as he looked on at his father and them. They are just stubborn that's all. That's why it's important that those around them know the value of diplomacy. I guess so, Tayuya said with a shrug. I'm going to go play my flute, show these dobes how you're supposed to play music. See you, she said with a smile and left. Naruto continued to walk around and seeing the others. He stopped and looked up at the carvings of the Hokages seeing Sarutobi and them looking down upon them all. Well the war is over, a voice said and he turned and saw Jiraiya walking towards him. But there is still much that must be done, he said. Naruto looked at him. We defeated the Jashinists yes and good riddance to those scumbags but there will be a greater threat soon enough. He said all seriousness in his voice. Naruto didn't say anything as he looked at him and back at everyone else. He knew what he was talking about. A threat that will be much stronger and more dangerous than Kage, Hidan, and the Jashinists could ever be. I know how much your friends, in Oto, Suna, and even here, mean to you Naruto. And I know you want to protect them and your father. Jiraiya continued to say. There's still a lot of stuff that must be done before they are defeated. You need to get stronger, much stronger if you ever want to stop them from destroying everything that has been fought for. My offer still stands, Jiraiya said and turned and walked away. Naruto watched him go and thought of what he had offered him during the time he was training with him. A week later, Naruto Uzumaki stepped out of the gates of Otogakure early at dawn, the sun just now starting to show. Dressed in his regular clothes and with the sound Hitai 8 strapped across his forehead. His Chunin vest was noticeably absent as he had left it. He looked around knowing that he hadn't been spotted or followed. Nodding to himself he started to walk away. Where are you going? A voice said and he turned his head and saw seated on a rock Haku. Judging by his relaxed stature, it seemed like he was waiting for him to come through. Haku, Naruto said and looked at him who smiled at him. You really think I don't know you Naruto? He asked him. I could sense something was troubling you. I already talked with Otusan about this, and he agreed to it. There's still a lot I have to learn. I'm still just a kid. I got a lot of stuff to find out. And you couldn't have done it here. Haku asked him and stood up. Don't try and stop me Haku, I already made up my mind. Jiraiya's offered to train and teach me, take me on a training trip. I don't know when I'll be back. It's for the best. There is still a lot in the world, places I haven't been, people I haven't seen, enemies I haven't fought. If I am ever going to become a leader I must learn everything I can. He said to him, I know I can't stop you Naruto. Haku declared looking at him. In the distance he saw Jiraiya waiting for him. I talked to Otusan about it last night and he granted me permission to do this. Naruto explained as he had told his father about what he had wanted to do. Orochimaru was reluctant, not wanting to see his son disappear for so long. But gradually he came to accept what he was doing. I'll be gone 2, maybe 3 years. So your mind is made up, I won't stop you Naruto. We have done much together, but now that it's ending I feel sad. Haku said, a solemn look on his face. Hey, don't get like that and start crying, Naruto said to him. I'll come back one day I promise. Keep watch over Otogakur and Tayuya for me will ya? He said and wrapped an arm around him and hugged him. Haku returned the hug as the two stood there. I'll see you later, Naruto said and broke the hug and turned around and started walking. Haku watched him go and started to turn around and head back into the village. Haku, he shouted and the boy turned around and looked back. Don't ever forget, we're brothers forever. Naruto shouted as he continued to walk. A smile formed on Haku's as he watched him leave Otogakur to continue on his path. Until we meet again, brother. Elsewhere, a man wearing a black cloak with red clouds on it was seated on a throne and he held in his hands a Bible. On it was the symbol of Jashin. He looked and skimmed through it reading the teachings of it. On his face were multiple piercings and his eyes were unique. The age of Jashin, how ridiculous. He said and snapped it shut in disgust. What utter nuisance. He said and stood up and destroyed the book incinerating it. There is only one God that shall rule over this world and bring true order to it. He said as he stood in front of a giant statue. Slowly more members started to appear, taking their spots. Conan, a blue-haired woman appeared to his left. Deidara, a blonde-haired man with one of his eyes covered up by his hair. Sasori, his partner, a man in a strange getup seeming like a scorpion. Zetsu, a plant-like man with half his skin white and the other black. Kakuzu, a covered man with 4 masks sewn to his back, stepped forward. Kisame Hoshigaki, a blue-skinned man with a grin and shark-like face appeared. Itachi Uchiha, a man with Sharingan eyes appeared. And finally the newest member, having taken Hidan's spot and wearing the ring he wore, stepped forward as well. He wore the Akatsuki robes and had sheathed a Nodashi. Muda Daidoji, he said as the newest member was revealed. The Akatsuki leader looked at them all, his Rinnegan eyes scanning all of them. You all know what must be done, for 3 years we shall stay hidden in the shadows. Let the world have this peace they call it, he said to them all. And then, the whole world shall know the true meaning of pain. Hey people, this is the end of the fanfic. What if Naruto was Orochimaru's son? I will take a few days to decide on the next fanfic. So tell me your thoughts in the comments, and if you liked it, hit the like button and share it with everyone. See you guys in the next video, bye.